Yeah, we're now live on YouTube, Chair.
Thank you. Lovely. Right. Okay, thank you, everyone. I think we'll start the meeting if we can, and then I know others will be joining in the next few minutes, but there is quite an agenda and there's some questions that we've got. So welcome to Schools Forum. I'll be chairing the meeting today. James is not feeling very well, so we wish him a speedy recovery. But it's just one of those things. He was feeling a bit rough this morning and isn't able to chair for us today. So you stuck with me. So welcome everyone to the December meeting of Schools Forum. As I say, there is quite a packed agenda, so we will go off with it now. Apologies for absence. I've got apologies from James, Victoria, from Angela, and from Catherine. Is that all the apologies you've got as well, Raj?
Yeah, that's all the apologies I've received.
Okay. So I think if we're happy to accept those apologies, the next item we have on the agenda is forum changes. I haven't got any changes to forum membership this time since the last meeting. So we will. So there's none to inform members of. Declarations of interests. Are there any declarations of interest from forum members on anything that is to be discussed at today's agenda that you haven't already declared previously, or that you need to reinforce a declaration on? No? Okay, brilliant. So what I'll do is I'll move on to the minutes and the officers' feedback. You've all had an opportunity to see the minutes from the last meeting. I haven't to be fair, I've gone through them and haven't noticed anything that doesn't reflect the meeting. So I wanted to ask if there is any comments on minutes or of the previous meeting, or any reason why we can't submit those to be signed. So if anyone has got any questions or thinks they shouldn't be signed as a true reflection of the meeting, if you put your hand up, otherwise I'll take it that everyone's happy for the minutes to be signed. Okay. Okay, Raj, I think we're okay with that. I've been asked if we can move the agenda item number 12 up to deal with it first, because the officers need to be engaged in something else later on. So with the consent of forum members, I'd like to take item 12 first, if we're able to do that, which is in relation to the de-delegation of school insurance services. And have we got on Sarah?
It's me, Mina. I'm sitting in on behalf of Sarah. Sarah wasn't present and she's since looked at it. On page 71 overall, there's some highlighted comments that she wanted everyone to read, so it was clear and transparent and no confusion.
Okay, would you like to run through those then for members? It's not highlighted on my page.
Oh, it must be just mine. Okay, so we have item 3. She's highlighted the third paragraph. Without the need for schools to obtain quotations, complete lengthy proposal forms and provide underwriting information. That's an extra added to it. The other paragraph, the insurance service is unable to confirm whether the cost of providing insurance cover as a traded service will maintain at the levels put forward for the de-delegated approach. So she's just waiting confirmation from Solihull. Okay, and the next step, following the vote by the schools forum, whether the service is de-delegated or offered on a traded basis, the insurance service will contact all schools to collect the information required by underwriters to renew the cover with effect from the 1st of April 2024. If the service is de-delegated, this process will pick up the requirements of schools in terms of the optional motor covers. So they were additional points that Sarah wanted to add since it last went out in November.
Okay. Okay. So I'll open this up to forum members now, and there is a vote that's needed on this, but Raj will correct me if I'm wrong. The vote will be for maintained members only, not for full forum on this. But anyone can raise any questions or for me on this subject. The one thing I wanted to bring out the paper is on the consultation, there were only 4 respondees from the maintained sector. And there's a question we've had submitted from Maria about the consultation, but I will take that when we go through the main de-delegations budgets, because I think it's very valid. There was quite a low level of responses, and at the appropriate time when we come to it, I will want to ask what we didn't do and what we can do better to try and get a high level of responses. However, for this consultation, out of the 4 responses we had, generally speaking, the 4 were in approval of the de-delegation for the school's insurance. Now, those 4 may or may not be representative of the 40 plus that sit in the maintained schools cohort. Are there any comments or questions the forum members have and would like to add in before we ask maintained schools forum members to vote on the options available? If you put your hand up, then hopefully myself or Raj will see it. Right, I'm not getting any questions at the moment. You can say anything, Raj? No?
No hands are raised.
Great, okay. So I think with this one, it is a vote on which proposal to go with. There is an overwhelming response that wishes to agree the de-delegation for schools insurance services for 24-25. I think the paper lays out the rates have been substantially cheaper than RPA and aren't now, but they are marginally cheaper. And the paper does clearly lay out the pros and cons. Members, you don't have to follow the consultation, but and particularly if you've got a wider pool of information or knowledge from the group of maintained schools. But I would like to ask, I think we've got 5 forum members on who are eligible to vote. If you would like to vote for option 1, which is the agreement to approve the de-delegation to insurance services for 24-25, a rate of £22.48 per pupil. And so if you can put your hands up if you're in favour of option 1 and to approve the de-delegation. Have you got anything? Have you got anything from that?
No, no hands are raised for option one. I'm looking at the attendees now. I believe only James Sherlock is the only maintained member in attendance.
Right. James, I know you got your camera off at the moment, but would you be able to indicate if you're the only member? It's probably easier for you to indicate what your preference is.
Yeah, to be fair, sorry, I was just pulled away for a split second. Yeah, I think, to be fair, if I'm the only member, I think I would just vote in line with consultation, because that's the best pool of knowledge that I've got.
Okay.
Apologies for the delay there.
No, that's quite all right. Quite all right. Okay, well, in that case, Raj, I think that's unanimous.
Yeah. Okay. Noted.
Okay, well, we've got further de-delegations to go as we work our way through the meeting. But I think if we go through the so thank you, Amina, for running through that paper with us. I think that I know you need to run off, so please do. I think we'll deal with the rest of the de-delegations at their appropriate point in the agenda items, in the hope that James isn't the only one who has to make these decisions for us. So if I move on then to item 3, the schools Q2 monitoring. Salik.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be presenting schools Q2 monitoring for 23-24, which encompasses from April 23 to September 23, and what the year-end balance forecast looks like, which we have received from our schools. So Table 1 outlines the income and expenditure up to Q2, and this time around, this has been split between pay, premises, and supplies and services, so we can capture the expenditure as to where schools are spending, and what that budget profile looks like for them as per Q2. Going forward, the reasoning haven't changed. What has happened over the last week is we've had a request made from the AD Education to chase for those license deficits, and the 4 schools highlighted, the 3 of them who haven't submitted it, the request has been made, and we'll be chasing that up as soon as possible after if a response isn't given by end of next week. So School Forum is asked to note the current year's budget positions on the second quarter. Effective budget monitoring, as you know, is a key tool in the financial management, and this process is there to ensure schools are given the support that's required if they're heading into a license deficit. The next steps are the Q3 monitoring report will be brought to January 24 School Forum. Just to highlight, that will be up to period 8, because period 9 won't come until end of January. So the next quarter's report, Q3 will only be up to period 8. However, that'll give us a more accurate position, as the teachers' pay award would have gone through by then in the December's payroll run, so we can capture that. I'll open it up to questions here.
Okay, I've got one to start with, and then I'll open it up to other forum members there. There does seem to be, on the quarterly monitoring, we can see a deterioration, I think, from the way I've read this, overall in the maintained school balances. Is that a concern, or how much of a concern is it that we seem to be dropping the level of balances by about 25% in this year, and what's that likely to mean for future years is part of the question. And 2, are we expecting a further deterioration after the teachers and support staff pay awards have been recognised through the income and expenditure statements?
I think there'll be a deterioration after the pay award, because even though they have been given the teachers' pay additional grant, but then that won't cover all of the costs. I think we'll have a better picture in next term, and then I think there'll need to be a framework in order to support schools. And as you're aware, schools spend, at the moment school realizes they are heading towards a deficit, they cut down their spending. I think we just need to highlight those things. to them when quarter 3 monitoring does come through. But I
Okay.
completely agree with your point. Yeah, they are deteriorating in that sense, aren't they?
Yeah. Have members got any questions? Sleek on this. No? Okay. Then I think we'll take the report as presented. Thank you, Salik, and we'll move on to the scheme for financing schools 23-24 and 24-25, which is you again.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so we brought this paper earlier last month to the school forum, and it was voted by the school forum members. We've gone out to consultation, and we received a total of 18 responses, and only 4 of them were maintained schools, 3 primary schools and 1 secondary school. I want to highlight there was 34 maintained schools did not respond, and we need to work around that, as you mentioned earlier, in regards to getting those responses from those consultations. Of those 4 schools that did vote, they unanimously agreed to set this policy for 23-24 and 24-25. If you'd like to run me through the changes made to scheme for financing schools, I can do. However, the table highlights those changes, and we did go through earlier last month through these changes. So I believe this paper is also for a vote from the maintained school members.
Yeah, I ran through it, and I thought there wasn't anything that I saw in there were really significant changes. It was more tidying up, I think, around administration in many points, and obviously reinforcing the returns and making sure that the returns come in. I would like to ask Neil, because I think it's a good point to tie in a question from Marie about the consultation. And it will be a theme for all of these votes. There was a very poor response, particularly from the maintained sector, and we do need to be able to do better than that, because I don't believe that we necessarily will have a representative cross-section. I know these things are always awkward. I know they're difficult. You can't force people to respond. But there were some suggestions from Marie on how potentially where we let ourselves down by not pushing out reminders more through the head teacher's weekly bulletin and being a bit more progressive on it. Neil, could you comment on what your view of the consultation is and how you think it can be improved, or if you think it can be improved?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I'd agree that the response is disappointing. I know a lot of these things are technical and are a continuation of the status quo, if you like. So people may feel might not feel moved to make a comment or to respond because it is a continuation. However, we do need the forum to get a representative view from schools as a whole. And we've got 140 schools. Like I say, the response was poor. Marie's comment about the heads newsletter is fair enough, and we can learn from that and do it in future. I think this particular consultation was done on quite a tight timescale. We wrote to all schools individually to ask them to respond, and obviously schools forum members, as part of their role, is to liaise with the cohort they're representing. So hopefully you and colleagues did that as well. But for next year, yeah, we can absolutely look to be more proactive in pushing it, and I hope there'll be more time as well, because the government, because of the changes in the funding that led to the delay of the previous meeting, we ended up a good 2 or 3 weeks later than we would want to have been, and so that would help the situation as well. So my apologies, and I accept the comment entirely in the spirit in which it's given, which is we want this to be representative as we can, and as we go into further consultations, we'll make sure we are more proactive in seeking to stimulate a response from as many schools as we possibly can.
Okay, thank you, Neil. Have colleagues got any questions for Salik or Neil for that matter? No. Checking. No. Okay. Now, Raj, this is a vote for maintained members.
Yeah.
James, over to you. Rather than well, I have to say, looking through the changes, they look like they're more of a nature that will improve the governance around the schools. But you're the person who can decide this. So, from a point of your point of view, for the maintained schools point of view, are you happy to approve the changes laid out in Table A?
Yep, they all seem very sensible changes, to be fair.
Super. Okay, we take that as approved then. Thank you very much. Thanks, James. I'm glad you're here. We'd have been in real trouble otherwise. And we'll move on to agenda point 5 then, the schools deficits budget policy.
Thank you, Chair. Once again, this policy also went in November, and this highlighted the 4 schools that we've highlighted as deficits and then require license deficits. One of those schools, Meadowside, have submitted their deficit application. That's with the LA, and we're working through that in terms of the approvals required at the moment. So, in essence, this also required a consultation response went out as a part of the consultation. Again, a total of 18 responses were received, and 4 of those were from maintained schools. Those 4 schools have unanimously agreed and expressed to set this policy implemented for 23-24 and 24-25. The policy itself hasn't changed much for license deficit, but I would like to highlight that we encourage schools to start the process as soon as school recognizes that deficit balance will be 1% or higher during the budget planning phase, or either by liaising with the school's finance team. And this submission needs to be made by the chair of governors in the agreed upon format. All the templates were also issued out in November School Forum. Should any school need those templates, please don't hesitate to contact us. We're happy to help and support that process. In terms of recommendations, I would like School Forum to note the consultation responses and ask the maintained school voting members to adopt this policy.
Okay, I've got, before I put James on the spot again, I have got one question. I think it is in relation to the deficit policy. No, that's all right. It's not. It's in relation to the school balances control policy. So, James, are you happy to accept essentially the continuation of this policy in line with the consultation responses?
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks. Okay, again, it's you again, Salik. Item number 6.
Thank you, Chair. This is the surplus balance control policy. So in June 23, we analysed the School Forum report on maintained school balances and license deficits, and the next steps were highlighted for us to do a thorough analysis of the balances held at 31st March 23 and how much were those balances committed. There was a consultation response. Again, we only had 4 maintained schools that voted, and they agreed to consider approving the balance policy and agreed to apply these balances as at 31st March 2024. In terms of the commitments and the nature of those commitments, were outstanding orders and grants, academic grants carried forward into the new financial years, and where there was neither of those, it was to do with the 3-year budget plan and maintenance and building work at schools and the school improvement plan, which carried the highest amount. Whereas if you look at Table 2, one of the consultations paper said the excess surplus beyond 10% of all school income was 0. That's because no school as at 31st March 23 had any balances over 10%, as they were all committed to be spent in the next financial year. In terms of the policy, again, nothing has changed from last financial year. Therefore, I would ask the school forum to note the consultation responses and considers approving the policy. If there's any questions, please let me know.
Right, I have got a question on this one. So, for the sake of variety, I'll ask this one. I see in the paper the current policy has a level, obviously a range of balances that can be held, and the greater sum is 10% of the budget share. Now, with academies, the DfE have laid out for reserves policy that the reserves policy you should operate between 5% reserve and 20%. How does this, or should this, have some comparability between the reserves policy that trusts operate and academies operate? As in, that would generally mean that you are taking into account reserves that have been set aside for a reason, but obviously at 20% there's a higher threshold, and those are the recommendations. Or do we still feel that a 10% upper limit is appropriate given the risks? I know it's probably academic given the reductions in the balances that we're seeing, but I just wanted to ask what the views were on that.
I think the DfE guidance is 5%, 8% for maintained schools. However, at NNC, we've capped that upper limit at 10%.
Right.
I mean, we can take it back and have a conversation between in finance and Neil in terms of the upper limits, but you'll get a lot of schools just committing money for the sake of it rather than utilizing that money for the education. Though I'm not proposing that would be the case, but that might be one of the risks that I can see from my side. But I'm happy to take it back and have a conversation with the team and capture their views.
Okay, I mean that might be something for a future policy, but for the time being, that was the comment I got on that. Have forum members, any of the forum members, got any further comments they'd like to ask Salik on this? No. Okay, I think James, we're still with you. I don't think anyone's.
Sorry, Paul. Lisa Boyd has also just joined, so she's another maintained voting member.
Brilliant, Lisa. Welcome.
Thank you.
Lisa, if yourself and James then are the two current members on the in attendance from the maintained sector, so it's for the two of you to vote. Are you happy to accept the school balances control policy for 24-25? Can I ask you to, if you're in favour?
I think Lisa's just dropped off the call. Just now, yeah. Oh, she's just 1 second. She's just joining back now.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I hope you and Lisa agree, James, because we're scuppered if you don't. I know what the rules are, and believe me, you don't want to go down them.
I think Lisa's back now.
I am. Thank you.
Yeah, perfect.
Sorry.
Lisa, are you in favour of the approving the school balances control policy?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Great. Perfect. That's that one approved then for everyone and in line with the consultation comments. Now the DSG update for period 6 is item number 7, and Soraya, you're going to present this for us.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm bringing this report to School Forum to update them on the current position of the DSG grant. This is an updated position following October School Forum. Section 2 of the report gives a background of the DSG grant and its 4 blocks to the School Forum members. Coming down to section 3 of the report, the original DSG budget for 23-24 was set at 354.9 million. This allocation was revised in July, leading to a reduction of 308k. The reduction mainly comes from a decrease of 382k in the early years block due to a lower participation numbers and a slight increase of 74k in the high needs block. After recoupment, the net budget with NNC stands at 120.6 million. The table in section 3 breaks this down for school forum members. And then if you move on to section 4 of the report, the overall outturn forecast at period 6 is an overspend of 6.4 million. This is broken down in the table under section 4.2 of the report. The report lists the reasons relating to the overspend, which is mainly in the high needs block. This is going to be discussed further under agenda item 8, so I won't go into all of the main reasons, but as outlined in the report, the main ones are greater E8CPs and the use of independent placements due to lack of sufficiency in NNC scores. Section 4.4 details the work that is taking place within the service to help mitigate these pressures, and this is going to be discussed further in the NFF consultation report under agenda item 8. That's up next. The DSG conditions of the grant set out that any local authority with an overall deficit on its DSG account at the end of the financial year must be able to present a DSG management plan to the DfE. We are currently having conversations with the DfE and are starting to put together a deficit management plan. And then there's an appendix A, which is attached to this report that breaks down the spend to cost centre level for school forum members, and then school forum members are asked to note this report. I'll open up the floor to any questions.
Yeah, can I ask forum members for questions, please? If you put your hand up if you've got a question. Right. I can't see any questions at the moment, so I will talk just about this for a second. We have got other papers where this is coming up, but this is the first time I feel, I know Rob and others who've been on forum for a long time, as have I, have seen pressure on the high needs budget. We've seen overspends on the high needs budget. We've seen a lack of management from the predecessor authority, and we've seen slow take-up in plans, but there are plans in place. The thing that I find, and I'd be interested in any of the forums members' views, is that this is the first time I've felt that we've got to a point where the level of deficit, the level of need outstrips what you can see ahead for any kind of rectification, whilst transferring money to the high needs block, which is something that's proposed later in the report, will have an impact. When you're running at this level of deficit, even with the proposals we've got in place, they do not appear to be adequate to solve this structural deficit.
And then everyone at the bottom is apprenticeship. Anyone on that?
Rob, yeah, Rob, would you got some comments around this you'd like to ask, and then I'll take a question from Peter.
Yeah, I mean, the only question that really I've got is around which of the three options in terms of deficit recovery are the council looking at right now? Are they looking at all three? And if so, do they have a favoured one? And if so, if it is a particular one, why that one?
Neil?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, so what we've got on the agenda coming up is a fairly detailed presentation. All of this is driven through the high needs block, you'll be aware. That's where the deficit are. We've done a presentation that we're going to give to the DfE tomorrow, and we thought it would be useful to go through it today with forum members so you can see what's being said, and it splits out some of the issues and some of the options within it. So perhaps that would be the best way to answer some of those questions, Chair, to go through that and take questions at a more detailed level about what we've included in there. So, like I say, we're really keen to make sure forum members are aware, and I think you've described it absolutely accurately. We've moved from a position of having pressures to being significantly in deficit, and we want you to understand why that is, and then ask questions around that if that's helpful.
Yeah, that will be. Peter, have you got something you'd like to add into there at this point?
Yes, if you don't mind, thank you. I completely understand that you're in a deficit position, the high needs blocks there, because you've had an increase of, as I understand it, EHCPs and so on. But the truth of the matter is that there is a huge increase in EHCPs since the pandemic. There is a huge increase in special needs needs in schools, and schools are struggling already with not feeling they have enough resources coming from the high needs block for them. And you know, I'm not blaming anybody, it's not anybody's fault, but I really think we need to make that clear to the DfE that the funding is not there to support children with special needs, and there are children falling through the cracks because of this, and we're seeing that in all of our schools that we represent here, I'm sure, certainly the ones I do, where we're seeing that. And I don't know any solutions, but I do think we should be clear that there is a real issue here of a shortage of funding.
Yeah, Peter, I think you're absolutely right. And I was doing some work around this as well. The F40 group of local authorities, who are the group of the, I wouldn't say poorest local authorities, but the least well-funded local authorities, have made a point on this. And all of them are struggling, and they've been making representation as well to government. And I know we separate and we should not take leads from anywhere else, but just for information, in the West, we have a schools forum written with the local authority to the DfE to explain what should be obvious, really, is that the pressures on high needs now cannot be met within the funding that is available, not just in this local authority or another local authority, but generally across the piece, and that something has to change. And particularly is if you don't put the investment in now, the cost, well, apart from the lost opportunity of those children being able to be the best that they can be and live independent and enriching lives and contribute to the economy, they also, the cost to society and to the taxpayer of not providing the support while they're in education is a drop in the ocean compared to the cost of a lifetime of waste. Peter, do you want to come back at all?
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to add that, and sorry to be a bit emotive, but children only get one chance at education, one chance. And you know, I say I'm not blaming anybody, but there is, you know, children are being let down here with special needs, and I really think I agree with Paul. We need to make representations to the DfE. You know, we really do as a schools forum, because schools are struggling out there.
Yeah. Scott, Councillor Edwards, is that something you would be prepared to look at with ourselves as Schools Forum and look at a joint representation letter?
Yeah, absolutely. It is something that we can look at, and I know we have regular communication with DfE. So yeah, no, happy to do that.
Brilliant. Okay, well we'll put that down as an action for myself and for Scott to compile something, obviously with you, Neil, and outline why we believe this is something that is beyond the control of the local authority and the ability of the local authority to control, and Schools Forum, and request that they look at this in the next year and round. The report is just for noting. So if there's no more questions at the moment, I think if we move on to the next report, and as we say, we'll come back to detailed questions around the high needs when we get to that part of the agenda. Okay, happy to move. Right. So I think it's you again, Soraya, isn't it?
It's Neil for this one.
Ah, Neil for that one. Okay.
Yeah, so what we've done, we've kind of combined the high needs update with this item. So I'm going to go through a presentation even,
Okay.
now, and like I said, I think we can take questions as we go through. Not being a Zoom expert, I'm going to try and share my screen and see how this goes. Please bear with just 1 second. Oh my goodness.
It's the green button at the bottom of the screen.
Yeah, I've got the button.
It should
I'm
have.
hoping if I do that and then that, can you see
Yeah,
the
we can see that.
presentation?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Right, that's it. Okay, so just following on from what the chair said and others have said, we are meeting with the DFE tomorrow. Now that's at our own behest. We asked for a meeting with the DFE because, as I think Soraya said earlier, if we have a deficit at the end of the year, we have to have a management plan and meet with them then. So rather than waiting for that to occur in that way, our intention was to be proactive, go and speak to them, say these are the concerns that we've got, and this is the data that we have available to support us. So we can feed some of the comments that you give us today tomorrow to them. We'd be very happy to do so, but that will be the start of an interaction with the ESFA stroke DFE that will go on until such point as we have a robust DSG that balances. And just to agree with what Peter and others have said, I think that will only occur when more funding is made available, because I don't think there's an answer to some of these pressures that we're all facing. What you've got is the start here. What we wanted to do was put children at the start. So we've got, it may just be images, but we wanted, a lot of this is about money and processes and figures, but children are absolutely at the centre of this. This is about outcomes of children, and I agree with everything that was said earlier about one go at education, and the ripple effect across society of concerns and all of those sorts of things. So we were keen at the start to the DFE talk, this is about children, but we're going to talk a lot about pounds and pence. But those pounds and pence represent the services and support that we can provide and schools can provide for children. That was really, really important. And then what we did is we split up the presentation into the challenges as we see them that Northants has, the pressures that led to the deficit, the mitigations we have or are having put in place, and then requirements, which is what we're asking of the DFE. So you can see what we are, as others have suggested, going and saying, actually, DFE, you can't just be passive and wait for us to find the answer, because we need to work with you to do this. So that's what we're going to do. Hopefully, did that update right, just to make sure that you can still see slide 2. Okay, so this is a bit of context. You all know all of this for Northants. It's really for the DFE benefit. You know why Northants was formed, and when. That's the breakdown of the schools we have. The key one I'll be highlighting to DFE again is, no PRUs or AP settings, based within the north, and that's something that we're looking to address, and we'll come on to that later. And then we've just got figures around the DSG as we started off, and the fact that we started with a small surplus, which has enabled us over a couple of years to manage this despite the in-year pressures that the chair talked about earlier. So you're aware of those. So these are the challenges, and it's only a selection of them, but we wanted to give, this is what we inherited, an EHCP 20-week performance of around 7%. So about 7% of our EHCPs were being managed through in 20 weeks. An EP service was under pressure and unable to meet timescales. Pupils being held in mainstream or waiting EHCPs. An EHCP being seen as a ticket to a special school. So there was very few EHCPs, or comparatively few EHCPs in mainstream. Almost all of them were in special schools. Obviously, we don't have PRU. Early help services are held by the trust and focus on social care issues. That remains the case. That's where the money for early help sits. When we started, we had very few SEND units and satellites, and we had outstanding and good special schools, but all of them were full. There was no early years SEND provision to speak of. No advisory teacher service. The processes were not up to scratch. the early help funding was at best inconsistent, and certainly not formulaic, and there was a lack of support to early years SEND as a whole. So what we've got then is the same list, but with what we've done about it. So our EHCP performance is now at 75%. Now that's, in some ways, that's just moved a problem along. So we used to have lots of children who needed an EHCP not assessed, and now we've got lots of children who have an EHCP and have been assessed, but we haven't got sufficient places to put them in. And so we've moved the problem along the process, but it causes further problems. We have invested in the EP service. We've looked to commission additional capacity. The backlog in the HCP cases is now, comparatively to other local authorities, very short. We have very few cases that go over 6 months. Not to say there's none, but some, not very many, and there's usually reasons for that. The number of EHCPs in mainstream is increasing, and I think mainstream schools are getting more access to that EHCP funding. The DfE did broker us some support from a regional outstanding AP trust, and we're working with them to try and develop provision locally. We are working with NCT around early help and the broader early help offers, and that links to things like family hubs and everything else that we're doing. And I think you'll see that progressing quite rapidly in the coming months as we have a lot of focus on that. We have created SEND units and satellites, with the limited capital resource we've got and the support, and I have to say the amazing support of schools, mainstream and specials, to put that in place. We've created well over 100 spaces this year. We continue to do that. There's a pipeline of more coming through, but more needs to be done. We have opened an early years SEND setting at Croydon, so that's a start, and we need to move on from that. We have created the outreach services, which fulfill some of the role that you might have expected advisory teacher services to do, and we've increased the use of the sensory impairment services to support mainstream schools more effectively, hopefully. We have put processes and flow diagrams and panels in place, which I know can feel bureaucratic and delaying to you as schools and to parents, especially sometimes, but it does give us some level of grip and some level of process. I'm not saying it's perfect. It needs streamlining, but we're getting there. And we do at least have a grip on the decisions that are being made and consistency and those sorts of things. We have put in place early help locality funding, which does have a process. Again, it is still a work in progress, but there is a process, and it does give consistency, and it does give transparency as to what we're doing, and there are no individual arrangements being put in place around that. And we have put in place the CENIF and CENIF Plus funding around early years. So what we wanted to do there was to say to the DfE, look, we've got lots of challenges, but we are addressing all of them in one way or another and trying to put things forward. If I carry on, here we go. So this might be quite small for you, but this is the high needs block year on year. So this is 22-23, and in 22-23 this is the outturn. So as you can see, we overspent by 1.977 million, and obviously with the surplus that we carried forward, we were able to deal with that. However, if we go to 23-24, we're now overspending the high needs block by at least 9.3 million. Clearly, that's not going to be addressed by surpluses. I think we bring £200,000 or £300,000 worth of surpluses forward. So this is a true deficit position, and we wanted to demonstrate that it's not that the deficit's appeared this year; it's just accelerated significantly this year as we've moved forward. So this is, I hope you can read this. This is because this is kind of important. This is where the pressures lie. So what we've done is break down all of the spend across the high needs block, and how much we budgeted and how much we're actually spent. So hopefully it's big enough. I will run through them quickly. So CENIF Plus is the top one. So that's obviously funding to early years. You'll see we're expecting to spend pretty much all of that as we anticipated. If we look at total mainstream top-ups, so that's top-ups for EHCPs in mainstream schools, we're overspending that by £2.5 million, and that's because we've got several hundred more EHCPs than we had last year. The rate of increase, which we anticipated would slow following COVID and moving away from COVID, has not, and has actually increased. So to give an example, pre-COVID, we would have got between 20 and 30 EHCP requests a month. Post-COVID, we got between 70 and 80. Last month, we got 110. So, that's not a decline in the rate of those coming on, requesting an assessment. Next line is mainstream units. We're £250,000 overspent on that. We know why that is. That's because we've opened more units more quickly than we initially planned, which is good news in one sense, but obviously has a cost, and we need to be aware of that. Similarly, on our total spend, I can't speak, our spend on special schools, we've expanded special schools. Special schools have taken on children for us. The children they've taken on have higher levels of need, and so their funding is higher. So we're £1.8 million overspent on that. Out of area provision, we're quite close. So we're overspent by £113,000 on that. So that's a much smaller number of pupils, as you'd expect. That's more manageable. Total independent provision, because we've got no sufficiency, because we have no capacity, over £3 million overspent on the total that we're putting into independent provision. The cost of an independent provision has gone up. Last year, I think the average was about £64,000. This year, I think it's £73,000, and it's moving towards £80,000. And the number of placements we make over £80,000 goes up every month. AP is another area. We've got a significant number of children not accessing school for one reason or other, might have been excluded or lots of other reasons. As you know, we don't have any AP, so we have to go out to purchase AP through providers in other local authorities. We also have lots of children who are on home tuition because we simply can't find a place for them. A really unsatisfactory outcome, but we have to put some kind of provision in at huge cost. So we're £2.2 million overspent on that, and the number of children in that category has really increased rapidly. Post-16 top-up, we're slightly underspent actually on post-16 top-up. I'm not actually very happy about that, believe it or not, because I don't think the post-16 curriculum is wide enough, and we're having trouble making the right provision. But within a budget context, we are slightly underspent. The AP Free School is a technical adjustment that the DFE do around schools that we access outside of our area, so I won't go into that in any further detail. And the support services, which is the services we provide, and I'll go into that in more detail later. We're £100,000 underspent on that as well. So, a small amount, but there. So you'll see that this was the budget that you as Forum saw originally, that had a balanced budget, and you'll see that as of today, and this is updated, as you can imagine, weekly or daily, we're £9.8 million overspent. Clearly, we've got a small surplus to offset that, and the rest of the DSG brings it back down to the number you've seen previously, but that's a significant overspend. Shall I pause there, Chair, and say, are there any questions on that? Because that's quite a key slide, I think, in terms of how we're spending our money.
Yeah, I'll take any questions from forum members on this. Anyone got any questions so far?
Oh, Sandra's got a hand up.
Yeah, afternoon everyone. Hello. This is really helpful. Thank you so much, Neil. I have a question around specifically the out of area and independent. Those two quite big high spends and the variances there. Do we know the number of students that would be in-house rather than going elsewhere because the provision in another county is exactly what the child needs rather than what we will be looking to plan into the local area? Does that make sense?
Sorry, I'm having trouble with Zoom. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
you can. Sorry, my problem with Zoom. So the answer to that is yes. So as you say, there are always going to be some children who go out of area because they have very specific needs, and you would have a regional response to that, and that's very specific about that particular set of needs. So, for example, I don't know, sexually inappropriate behaviour, you might have a centre somewhere, and that draws in a very small number of people from each area that picks that up. It's fair to say we're well beyond that. So we know exactly how many pupils are out of area. We know where they are and why they're there. And I think the nub of your question is, are there those that we could have met the needs of here? And the answer is absolutely there is. A significant number of those needs could have been met here if we'd had the provision to do that. And to give you an example of that, next year, particularly around things like SEMH, the number of children who are looking to be placed next year into an SEMH, particularly secondary setting, and the number of SEMH secondary places we've got are nowhere near aligned. So the only option then is we have to go out to the out of borough and independent placements. I'm happy to give you a more of a breakdown of that at the next meeting if that would be helpful. But like I say, just to reassure you, we do know.
Yeah. So the next bit of that then, I suppose, is just to know whether that will actually bring us into line. With the additional costs with increasing capacity within the north. How many years down the line will it be before we break even on that increase? I'm really sorry about the background noise, the nature of the school.
Oh, okay. I think you might have my dog in the background as well. So if we look at the overall issue, we can't build our way out of the issue we've got, because that's not going to be the problem. I'm going to close the door. Excuse me. Yeah, so you can't build your way out of the problem, but sufficiency is a key element of that. Okay, but what we need to deliver in terms of sufficiency is very costly. So if, for example, we could wave a magic wand and have an SEMH secondary school tomorrow, you know, at a cost of £18 million to £20 million, we would do that. But how we make that happen is the conversation we need to have with the DfE. And there are other, I'll only pick on SEMH because it's a particular one. So, and even if you do that, let's say we got an SEMH free school from the DfE, they usually take 4 to 5 years to deliver. So what do we do in the interim? You know, we're just going to go on a continuing spiral in the wrong direction. So there has to be a greater breadth of response to this than just looking to increase efficiency, but is a key element of it. And like I said, I'll come on to some of that later if that's helpful. Shall I carry on, Chair? Is that right?
Yeah, please do. Thanks.
So like I say, that's where we are. So in this year, just in this year alone, we're almost £10 million overspent in the DSG. What I would remind you is we didn't do a transfer from schools block to high needs block this year. And the reason we didn't do one was, one, because we started the year with a surplus, and that seemed like an unreasonable thing to do. Two, schools were facing significant cost of living issues within, as everyone was, but particularly around power and all those other things at the time. And it just felt immoral to be saying at that moment we need to transfer money from the high needs block, the schools block to the high needs block. Now this year, from your perspective, might not feel any different. I think it is from our perspective, because we start from a deficit, and we'll come and talk about the transfer later and whether we do that and how much it is. But as you can see down here, the transfer from high needs block, which could have been 0.5%, was actually 0. And just for you, that's about £1.5 million one way or another, just how much that would have made a difference. So these are the pressures, and these got some figures by them. I don't intend to go through them in any huge detail, but if you think the overall, at the end of November this year, we had 3,704 EHCPs, an increase of 8% in 12 months. It's a really huge increase and an ongoing increase. It's not one-off. Total number of children with SEND's gone up to 7,200. The average cost of EHCP is now 7,397 when it was 6,823. The numbers of children benefiting from early help funding is new, so these numbers will go up, but it's gone up from 107 to 307. We have in this year actually identified some historic issues. So about £500,000 of the spend actually relates to previous years, and so won't be. We had a significant number of children moving into the area. We have encouraged schools to apply for early help funding and the HCP funding at the appropriate time, which of course drives cost, but hopefully gives the right support. And we've increased things like early help. This is a note about speech and language therapy, which actually relates to next year. So next year, we are going to have to contribute to speech and language therapy that currently is funded by health, and the local authority should legally be paying some element towards. So that's £243,000, but that's for next year. Further pressures around sufficiency, and we've talked about those. So there's part of the answer to your question. So 21 more children attending independent special school this year than last year, and the average cost going up, as I said, from 61 to 78. All of those increases above inflation. The commission number of special school places has gone up, but overall not a huge amount, and we're still looking to do that. 277 people from outside the UK is an interesting thing that's going on, and we are developing new SEND units. So there are lots of pressures, so that gives you some numbers and some money behind that. We then talk about exclusions. So there have been 91 permanent exclusions last year, and so 56 this year. That causes huge pressures in AP, as I've suggested. AP providers are putting their costs up significantly. The cost of a key stage 3 AP placement has gone up 75%. That's a huge increase year on year, and we're having to deal with that. There was a time when we had no Key Stage 3 AP, so having some is good, but the cost has gone up. As I've said previously, home tuition cost has gone up. At the same time, attendance rates remain low, although in line with national, to say, persistently absent, so less than 90% attendance at 21%, and severely, so less than 50% attendance at 2%, which is actually in line with national, but a significant number for us and something we have to be aware of. EHE, families moving in and out of EHE cost us money as we have to support them in and back out again of EHE, that's an issue. And there are pressures on mainstream, particularly in secondary school places generally, that we have to be aware of. Right, once again, I hope you can read this. So this half, or this bit, is all exactly the same as the one you saw earlier. This is the column we're interested in. I don't know if you can see my mouse, I'm pointing. It's the one on the right we want to be looking at, okay? So this is our estimate for next year, okay, of how much we think we're going to spend. So if we look at the bottom line to begin with, we started this year with a budget of 57 million. We think next year we're going to spend 69 million. So that's a 12 million pound increase from last year's budget, okay? And this shows you where we think we're going to spend those amounts of money. You can compare this year's spend with next year's budget, and you see some of them go up and some of them stay broadly similar. So mainstream units, for example, goes up because we've got new units. Other things out of area go down, because try not to use those as much, and there's some historic issues within there. So you can see where we've tried to minimise this as much as we possibly can, and still we're at 69 million. Our high needs block allocation for next year is 60,564,000. So just on budget, we're 8.8 million pounds short. Okay, and if that were to come to pass on top of the current year's budget, we would end up at the end of next year being 18 million pounds in deficit just within our DSG. Okay, having moved from a surplus 2 years ago. If we do the transfer, which is what we're going to ask for your approval of in the meeting, that would give us an extra, as I say, about 1,437,000, and that would reduce the deficit in year to 7,360,000, and the cumulative deficit to 17 million. If we were to do the maximum transfer we think we could possibly do, and this is a theoretical, but if we did, we think that would generate a further 2.8 million and will reduce the deficit to 4.4 million. But that's obviously taking a huge amount of money out of schools block and moving it into high needs block. So it's there just as a demonstration and for a conversation piece with the DFE. Remembering the DFE are very loath to agree any transfer above 0.5% into high needs block. So it's there as a discussion piece more than anything else. So that's that. If I go on to the next slide, of those, these are the things that we think are non-statutory. So these are the things that if DFE said to us, you've got to try and balance the budget, you need to save money, these are the things we think we could immediately cut. Okay, so we could not do CENIF plus funding. Okay, I'm sure early years providers would have a view on that, but we could not do it. We could not do early help locality funding. It's not statutory. We could say either a child is managed within a school setting or it's an EHCP. Special arrangements are a bit of an oddity. Some of these are quite historic. This is where we have a child, as you can see, mostly in a special school, where their needs have escalated to the point where they could be moved to a more expensive placement. So rather than spending £80,000 on a independent placement, we liaise with the special school, say, if we supported you with an extra £10,000, could you maintain that need within your school? We're trying to move away from these, but it is a way of saving money. These are in specifically to save money. If we took these out, I imagine quite a number of the pupils who are supported by these would then have to be replaced in a higher provision that would cost more money. But we could stop doing it. We could take away the outreach services that we've just put in place because that's not statutory. We could take away the inclusion projects. That's work we're doing in secondaries, particularly around AP and other things, sort of one-off funding that we do. We could take out the non-statutory elements of inclusion and specialist support services, which is quite a significant saving, but would mean we as a council would not be supporting you through any route in that way. And we could not support the Northamptonshire Parent Partnership that we currently do, which gives us an overall saving of 6 million. So if I go back up, even if we took all of those things out and you let us have a 0.5% transfer, we would still be overspent, and we'd have no support services, and we'd have no early help, and you'd have our early help funding. So that is the position we find ourselves in. I think, Chair, I'll pause again at that point, because to me that sounds, that's kind of the crux of the matter.
Yeah, thank you, Neil. I think it is, and I think this this paper, if it hasn't been circulated, if we can get it circulated or circulated again, will be helpful. And it does lay out the issues we faced, or the severity of the issue, which, as I say, to me, for the first time, is beyond our ability to control, with that, even with some fairly severe actions. Can I ask forum members if anyone's got any? If you put your hand up, if you've got any comments or information, Sandra.
Just a comment, observation, I suppose. I mean, it is quite frightening, but it just supports everything you said at the beginning there, Paul. From my perspective, yeah, just puts everything into context. The information is really, really valuable. It doesn't change anything for the children that we're talking about.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you. Just a few questions for clarification, for my understanding, please. Appreciate all the information, by for clarity, do the ESFA have the power to enforce mitigation? Just so.
So we are meeting with the ESFA. We took as proactively as I said tomorrow, but as somebody else said earlier, we will have to have a DSG management plan, and that will have to demonstrate how we are going to bring this back into balance over a period of sort of up to 5 years as a reasonable timeline. If we say that is not possible, then ESFA would have to take action. Now, I'm not quite sure what that action would be, but if you think of what happened previously in the move to trust, for the trust status for the social care, there are interventions that they could take. I don't think they would immediately move to say you must do this, this, and this, but they will say you must present a balanced budget and force those decisions on us, I think.
Thank you. Just two more little ones, really. On that, of the mitigation, you labelled them as non-statutory. So would I be right in assuming that the funding mechanism is based around statutory needs? So therefore, by offering non-statutory, it's creating pressure?
No, I don't think that is the case, because there is an expectation that local authorities will put in place the systems to support children with needs at all levels, okay? And it's very clearly accepted that one of the things we should be doing is putting early help type services in to stop needs escalating and causing pressure, as is the case that's seen here. So I think there is an expectation within the funding of the high needs block that we do these things. It's just not a statutory expectation. And I think you'd find every local authority does some, all, or more of those things that we do. And if we didn't do them, there would be no funding for them at all. So they would just cease. So no, I think the funding we get is not based on you will just use this for EHCPs and special school placements. It is about meeting the totality of high needs, whatever that may look like. And then it's obviously left to us with your support as to how we do that.
Right, thank you. So it's a disparity between best practice or that, or adapting to those needs and actually statutory funding.
Yeah, absolutely. If we retract back to our statutory minimum, it's a very different picture.
Thank you. Just one final one. It's just because I'm a figures chap. You presented on there, Neil, a 9.8 million deficit. And I just wondered if I was looking at the table on the 4.2, page 35, and it mentions a 6.8 million deficit. I don't know if I'm comparing the wrong figures. No, is that just an updated version of what?
Yeah, so I think the one that you've got is it period 6, the one you're looking at?
Yeah.
Yes, that's period 6. That one is.
And this is today. So this is where we think we are today, and that's where we thought we were, just to demonstrate the rate at which this is increased, which is another thing. And I have to say the biggest difference between what you see in period 6 and what you see here is AP. The number of children we are now supporting to either access AP outside of Northamptonshire because we don't have any, or to access home tuition has absolutely skyrocketed and is costing us a huge amount of money. That's the biggest difference. Other things have changed, and we've got more HCPs. Like I say, last month 110. Well, we didn't anticipate 110 in month 6. These sort of things just grow over time. So that's when, in terms of our level of confidence, I'm much more confident that what you see before you now is because I hope you can see we've done a really detailed piece of work on this now, and I think this. I'm hoping this won't increase towards the year end, but
and I suppose it's great. It's great understanding that, because like I say, period 6 was period 8 now, or period 9, something like that. Say a drift of £3 million between now and the end of the year is like you say, as a massive shift. So like you've pitched for next year, I suppose there's a bit of caution around, actually, if it shifted that much in this short time frame, actually, where's it going to be next year?
Yeah, and that is a real concern. I have to say, we set this year's budget perhaps overly optimistically on the basis that the effects of COVID and the increased numbers of EHCPs would settle back towards, not at, but towards their pre-COVID levels, when actually they've continued to increase. For next year, we've taken a different approach. Let's just project what we're currently doing onwards on the same trajectory. It's not worst case, because things could obviously get worse, but it's a much more informed and representative model of where we are.
Right, thank you very much.
Thanks. Robert, there's a couple of things I'll add into that as well that might be helpful. One of the mechanisms that is in place is I think they call it the emergency brake, but essentially it can lead to some changes in funding, but effectively it's working with the DFE and the SFA. And I've talked, within part of the roles that I do, I'm also school resource management advisor, and I talk to local authorities and trusts throughout the country. And one of the London boroughs is in that position at the moment, and talking to a colleague he also sits on the DFE committees on funding, but about his experience of when they've engaged that emergency brake. It's been a fairly unhelpful position. Some of the comments were coming back, well, just cut your EHCPs by 10%. No trying to match need to funding. It was more around some fairly arbitrary actions. And on the other side of it, with non-statutory, when you I've got colleagues who work in Birmingham who are running special schools in Birmingham, and the movement that they've had when with their insolvency, they've had to move back to statutory provision only, has had an absolute catastrophic effect from a trust that was doing well and managing its finances well and had reserves, to possibly looking at insolvency itself within the next 12 months. So the ways that appear attractive sometimes aren't always. And the first starting point is making sure that we're doing everything we can in our powers to use the funding well, and then if we have to, present a picture, which I think is the strategy that that Neil and the team are doing.
Can I just comment on that, Chair, very quickly, just to agree with you, but also to say, in our initial conversations with DFE, in order to access any support, you have to have a 5-year plan that moves you back into balance. Okay, so you've kind of got to have the answer that says, we need you, DFE, to give us some money, and then we'll be back in balance. Well, that's a very hard thing to commit to, given the level of spend that we have at the moment. So that is the negotiation that I think we're going to kick off tomorrow and be in with the DFE over the coming 6-9 months, I expect. So yeah, to agree with you, it's not just a pot of money that they dish out to authorities who they think are in difficulty. It is only used to support a plan, and some of those plans, as you say, will be quite draconian in what they expect. And if we were asked to cut EHCP funding to schools by 10% on every EHCP, that would have a really significant impact on schools that are already struggling. So yeah, I agree.
Okay, I'll ask Marie and then Peter. Marie, you've had your hand up for a while.
Thank you, Chair.
And thank you, Neil and team, for the detailed analysis. It's really useful to see. I suppose the figure that's concerning is the £13 million spent on independent provision. And I just wonder, within the 5-year plan, is there a proposal to phase that out when children come to the age of phased transfer? And also what contingency measures are in place if any of those independent schools were to close? If there's a change in government and the VAT rules change, lots of them have said they will struggle. How will those students then be brought back into the system? And has there been a forecast of what that might look like?
That's a really good question, Marie. Thank you for that. And it is a real struggle for us. So at the moment, we have no capacity to meet the needs of those children in independent provision. Okay, we couldn't bring them back because there's nowhere for them to go. We want to invest in sufficiency, and we're investing lots in sufficiency. But like I say, there's a difference between investing in, you know, really vital units and special school satellites and expanding special schools and building a special school, or more than one special school, which is what we really need, you know, at a cost of 18 to 25 million pounds, which we don't have. And we, as you will recall, we were unsuccessful in our bid. In terms of the financial sustainability of the special school, of the special independent schools, I think that reflects the increase in costs that you saw, the 61 to 78. I think they are struggling, you know, and despite charging us £78,000 a child, you know, some of them still struggle financially. What we're doing on that, we have invested in some commissioning capacity. So our relationship with those schools, rather than being done on an individual child basis, will be done at an organisation to organisation basis. Because some of those special schools, we might buy 50 to 90% of the places in their school. So we are independently dependent on each other. You know, so if we took all our kids out, they'd go bust, and if they went bust, we'd have none of our kids, sort of thing. And so that relationship is something we're really working on through a commissioning basis, to some extent, to try and reduce costs. It says if we guarantee to buy 100% of your places, can we have a lower cost, which is, you know, a worthwhile outcome, but also to support them to be sustainable and continue to meet need when, as you say, there are pressures that they're facing.
Okay, thank you, Peter.
Yeah, thank you. Just a brief comment, really. I don't think you can do anything about this, but it seems to me this is a political thing, really, about there being, you know, we can work out the budgets, we can try and squeeze things here and there if we want to, but there isn't enough money in the system. And it's great that you've taken the initiative to go to the DFE. I wondered how much facilities the Schools Forum had to lobby our local members of Parliament in Northants about this. And I also note very gently that we might have a by-election in Northants in the new year.
I think if that's a political question, I'd defer to Councillor Edwards.
Yeah, I realise it's a political question, but I just think it was worth commenting on. I know you can't comment on it. That's fine.
No, I think we can make the points though around it, which we talked about earlier with Councillor Edwards. If we were to, from Forum and the local authority, write to the Secretary of State and outlining the issues, which they'll be getting letters from all over, I'd imagine, but outlining how this needs to be addressed, and despite the real hard work and initiatives that are going on, we're reaching a point where we're unable to recover this, and to lobby for an increase in funding. And that may well be very, very helpful to the Secretary of State as well when they're having their discussions with Treasury about budgets, to say this is something, if we don't address it now, it's going to translate to far bigger costs from the Treasury through society, let alone the cost to those children involved in this, in not being able to fulfill their full potential. So it's a false economy not to spend the money early and help later. So I think if Councillor Edwards is happy with that, it doesn't have to be a political message, because to be fair, I haven't seen any political parties coming up with a we will do this and everything's going to be absolutely fine. It's about priorities and getting the resources into these higher needs budgets across the board, really.
Yeah, I'm more than happy with that, Paul. I absolutely agree with it. It doesn't have to be political messages. And you just need to get our point across. And I'm sure it's the same for every authority up and down the country. So the more that do exactly the same, the better as well.
Yeah.
Shall I continue, Chair? Is that okay?
Yes,
Because
please.
I know time is ticking.
Yeah.
So that was the press. And just going back to your point, absolutely happy to share the presentation afterwards. To be honest, it was finished somewhere last evening, so it wasn't really ready to be circulated. So we will circulate it post meeting, absolutely. So what we've then said is, okay, that's the position. What are we doing about it? So there's a whole list of things, some of which are fairly at a strategic level, and some are much more operational, and some you'll recognise, and some are on the way. So we do have a new SEND strategy at a very high level. We will have an improvement plan that includes lots of the work that we're doing. We do have a co-production charter. We are producing a SEND sufficiency strategy, which is going to demonstrate the shortfall. As I've already said, we're doing a lot of work around commissioning, including a joint commissioning strategy. The accountability board, the SEND accountability board, is looking at system-wide, how can we work better with health and the trust and anyone else, so all those key partners to work better. We do want to support schools to be as inclusive as possible, and understanding the pressures schools are under, and that's a joint piece of work. We are going to look at early help services as a whole. We need to look at how those are joining together, how you access them, how families access them, how schools access them, and how that works. So that's a piece of work that's underway. We need to do a lot more with the third sector organisations. We've got some really good third sector organisations in here, and we just need to make sure that's all joined up in a really helpful way that is accessible. We need more capacity. We know that's going to come out of the sufficiency strategy. We as a council need to move to a permanent staffing structure. We still have lots of interims due to funding uncertainties and other things, and that will give more consistency to our approach, I think, and support us in delivering. I think family hubs are key about early help and about supporting families early. With the Schools Forum, we want to look at EHCP funding bands, not, I should say, to reduce them by 10%, but just to make sure they're appropriate. We also need to look at special school RAS funding bands because they've been in place a long time. We haven't increased them, and we are looking to increase them next year. We are looking to strengthen the EP offer. We know that schools haven't been able to access traded services, so we're looking at how we can go back to a position where we can offer traded EP services in a way that's actually deliverable, and we've got capacity to deliver while still meeting our statutory responsibilities. Obviously, the outreach services we put in place are new from the special schools, and more are coming online, but we need to look at their scope to make sure they're targeted as effectively as possible. There's lots of good work going on, but how can we target that as effectively as possible? How can we work with secondary schools to look at AP provision, and how can we make sure that we get AP within the area? We still await our bid. DfE says we're going to get feedback from our bid in the autumn. Well, there's not much of the autumn left, so we shall see when that comes through. We need to be clear about if parents request education other than at school or a personal budget, that we know how we're going to deliver that. It's all a bit responsive at the moment and needs to be a bit more controlled, I think. Graduated response, as you would expect, to make sure there's everything in that way. School support, we want to broker and help schools support each other where there's good practice. We are having a new computer system now. A new computer system is never the answer to any problem. Usually, it just causes a whole load more and costs a lot of money. But it does have the potential to improve the experience for parents, for example. So rather than phoning the EHCP team, they should be able to log on and say, at what stage is my EHCP application? Where is it? And it becomes much more interactive. So hopefully that will help. That's due in January 25, I think. We do need to look at the non-statutory services funded through the high needs block. I gave you that list. I think you'll agree there weren't any that you immediately thought, well, let's not bother doing that. But we do have to look at those and say whether they are as effective as they can. And obviously, we're always looking to attract additional funding through grants and be as efficient as possible. Finally, then, these are our asks, and I'd be happy for you to comment and add to these. These are our asks of the DfE. So firstly, to recognise that the money we get does not reflect the need in NNC. And I think that's what colleagues were saying earlier, basically, we don't have enough money. If you look at the need and you look at the amount of money we got, it doesn't add up. We need them to support us in getting the 0.5% school block transfer to high needs block done this year. We didn't do it last year, but we would like to do that this year. and we would like access to additional revenue resources on focused development, so basically grants. You know, is there a grant around inclusion? Is there a grant around speech and language, SEMH? You know, it might be time limited, it might be one-off funding, but can we access that to make a difference? Would that make a difference? From a capital perspective, we need to know if we've got our AP bid, that'll make a big difference. We want another chance to bid or other ways to get new special school provisions, with SEMH being the highest priority. And we'd like access to additional capital resources to support schools to expand and enhance facilities to meet needs. From a school's perspective, we need DfE to be looking at inclusion. We need to make sure all schools are inclusive, and we need to make sure all schools are funded in a way that meets the expectations on them. I think colleagues on the call may well agree that the expectations on schools don't align with funding in the same way that high needs block for us. The needs don't align with the expectations. So, you know, schools funding needs looking at as well. It's not all about the high needs block. From a local authority perspective, we're really keen to get some peer-to-peer support from other local authorities that are doing a good job. What can we learn from elsewhere? We do have a DfE SEND advisor, and we need them to be really effective rather than just to point out our deficits. So, you know, what's the answer rather than what's the problem? That'd be really good. We need to know what they're going to do if we do go £19 million in deficit next year. What they're going to do about it, you know, and how are we going to manage that within the accounts of the council, because that has an impact on the balances of the council. That's really, you know, something we need to understand. And that's the next one, what's called the statutory override, that we're able to have a deficit in the DSG and not have to fix it the next year. We need that to continue, otherwise we simply won't be able to manage. And as you can imagine, if we had to cut, if we had to balance next year's budget and pay off this year's £9 million, we really would have no chance of getting anywhere. And what we would like them to do is give us and schools medium-term financial settlements. So rather than saying, here's your money for next year, say, here's your money for the next 3 years or 5 years would be even better. Then at least we could plan, but we haven't got the final high needs block and schools funding for this year. It won't come until, I think, the 20th of December. And so that's a concern. From an Ofsted perspective, we'd like inclusion to be really key to what they do to make sure schools are being inclusive and to pick that up where it's not. For inspections to be targeted around non-inclusive behaviour, so off-rolling and those sorts of things, and that the SEND inspection, which is obviously an inspection of us, reflects the pressures that we have and is realistic and doesn't just say go away and fix all the problems. So that's that as well. This is my final slide on this bit, then I'll go on to something else, and I will stop questions after this. This is the timeline. So somewhere in here is us, here's the schools forum, and then meeting with DfE tomorrow. DSG settlement is on the 18th of December, hopefully as ever. And then we have to go to executive with some drafts on the 21st. And I won't go through it all, but that goes through to schools budget issues on the 28th. But you can see there's a flow of things, and that's all very tight. And going back to my previous point, if we had 3 years worth of settlements, we wouldn't be in this, you know, rushing through this the whole time. And it is really, really tight. Once again, Chair, I will stop before I go on to what's a completely change of topic and ask if there are any questions.
Forum. So we've got any further questions for Neil on this? Rob?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I think firstly, like you said, I've been on the forum for quite a number of years now, and I've never known a pressure to be as it is right now. And Neil, I really appreciate what you've done today, because you've really set out with a lot of clarity, perhaps more so than we've ever had, the very difficult position we're in and the multiple factors that have been at play that have caused that situation to arise. I mean, I kind of wrote down a few figures just saying that we've gone from 21-22, where we had a £2.5 million surplus, to a potential £16-17 million deficit by the time we get to the end of 24-25, which is just a really shocking position to move from and to. I think you put on there about for example, one of the measures being a 0.5% block transfer from the schools block to the high needs block. And you know my voting in the past, I've never been a big fan of that, if I'm really honest, but I can't see how you can not at least have a 0.5% block transfer. And potentially one of the things you didn't put on there, but I hope you will ask the DfE if they will actually consider a higher block transfer than that, because I know they do. Sometimes, you said it's very unusual, but they sometimes under some circumstances do consider that. And I'm not saying that schools want to take a bigger hit earlier on in terms of that with their other revenue streams. But I do think with a deficit of that size, and I agree with what you said, Paul, it is somewhat beyond us to try and secure. But as you said, Neil, we can't go in with a plan of nothing, and I know you're not, but we have to go in with a plan that says over 5 years we can come back to a break-even position. And I think going and saying that, yeah, we will certainly be asking for 0.5%. We may be asking for more DFE. Would you support that? And I find myself in the unusual position of actually suggesting this, but I think it is something that you need to go and potentially have conversations with as well, because I didn't see it on the list. I know you're going to ask for half, but I would be saying if we were able to ask for more from that and the schools forum would agree 1% or 1.5%, I know we would need some modelling around that, but would that be something that the DFE might agree to? Thanks.
Neil, would you like to?
Yeah, sorry, Chair, I was just finding the right slide. So thank you, Rob. I agree with everything you said. In here, this is a modelling of 1.5% in here, just to say, we did look at that. So that's 0.5%, and that's the additional you would get if you went up to 1.5%. So we have looked at that. I have to say, our initial conversation with the DFE this week, which was just a preamble to the proper meeting tomorrow. It was just a what's the agenda type thing. They were very clear that that's another thing, like additional funding, very unlikely. And when I say very unlikely, I think impossible is nearly the word, to be agreed without a plan that actually shows how that's going to bring you back into balance. So there may be a time when we can have that conversation with them that says, if you allow us to do this, and we do all these other things, in 5 years' time, we think we might be back towards a balance where they might allow that. Outside of that, and certainly in the position we're currently in, which is, we know we're going to do lots of things, we've got a plan, but we can't see how that's going to take us, turn the ship round to get us back to a balanced position. I don't think they would. They won't agree to that without that plan. So that's a really urgent piece of work for us. That's why we've proactively gone to them, and that's why over the next 6 months we want to get that in place. But I think, I'm really interested in the forum's views on the 1.5%. But for today, what we really need is agreement that the 0.5% can be transferred. We can then build that in as part of the plan, and further transfers in further years if that's appropriate to make us balance. So thanks, Robert. I agree with your comments.
Thanks, Neil.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, Rob. There's also one I've discussed with Neil before now, which is the converse side of that, is by doing a transfer continually, have we been masking an issue that should have been out there earlier, and force some more discussions with the DFE on funding, because by taking it out of schools block, which creates more pressure for the rest of the sector, but has it just been masking a problem that should have come out earlier? I think the conclusions we've reached are probably, well, we've been doing the right thing and trying to use the blocks in the right way and give the support as much as we can, and that will be a discussion.
Yeah, Chair, if I can just comment on that. I agree with what you're saying exactly, and perversely, again, the fact we didn't do the transfer this year has rather demonstrated that, hasn't it? In previous years we have done the transfer, even though, and this is prior to NNC, the transfer has been done despite there being a surplus, which has then kind of been very odd and as you say, masked the problem. Whereas now it's very, very clear what the underlying issue is. So I agree with that entirely.
Yeah, Lisa, you got your hand out.
Right. Hi. Thank you very much. I found that very useful, if not sad. I was just going to say, with the CENIF Plus, considering that we're going to be having more 2-year-olds accessing free funding from April, does that account for the fact that we'll probably see an increase in demand with CENIF Plus when that funding comes through?
Again, an excellent question. So if you put more young children in a position where their needs might be identified earlier, then yes, you might get more call on CENIF Plus because they would have to be met. The reverse side of that is they would still have those needs when they turned up in primary school. And if we've addressed them early, is the longer term prognosis improved and their needs don't escalate in the way they would otherwise. So I know exactly what you mean, but it does fit very nicely. And that's why I'm supportive of CENIF Plus with the early help model, which is identify needs early, put something in place with a view to those needs not escalating and becoming much harder to address and much more expensive at primary, secondary, or later in their lives. But the point you're making is absolutely correct, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, has anyone else got any questions? I mean, it's been a very, very good debate and a very good presentation, Neil, and it is the crux of the main issues we're faced with the DSG and the overspend. So it's been well worth spending the time on. Is there any other questions or comments for Neil?
If there aren't, Chair, and there is a part 2 to this presentation, so I'm going to carry on a different issue, would it be worth offering colleagues a 5-minute comfort break? Because that was probably quite a lot to take in and people might need a stiff drink. Yeah,
I think it would. Is everyone happy with that? If we take a 5-minute break, or come back at 1:45, it's about 6 or 7 minutes, to just grab a drink and then we'll resume then. Okay. Okay, Neil, are we ready to carry on?
Yes, Chair. I'm going to share again, so bear with just 1 second. You see that one? Excellent. Thank you very much. So the next stage of my presentation, and this one's much shorter, you'll be pleased to hear, is about the transfer and about how we manage the budget and the DSG. So as was shown on the timeline, as we mentioned before, we don't get our final settlement until 18th, 19th of December. Obviously, we have to set a budget in the first instance to work with, and we go from there. And there shouldn't be significant changes. So this is where we think we are at the moment. So if I move on. So this is our estimated blocks, and hopefully some of these figures around the high needs block. This is the schools element of the schools block. Sorry. So this gives us pupil numbers and the total funding year on year, and some protection, so you can see the figures that we're getting, and the increase year on year. So that's how the schools block's made up for those that are interested. I think PUF and SUF are primary unit of funding and secondary unit of funding, from what I remember. So people are aware of what's going on with that. And then people numbers on the end. If I can move on. There we go. So this was what we based the consultation on the budget we had at the time. So you may remember the consultation was based on a minimum funding guarantee for all schools set at 0.25%, increases capped at 0.25%, scaling at 100%. That gave us 281 million. High needs block transfer of 0.5% at 1.415 million, and then a growth fund of 133,000, and then you get the total schools block and total movement of funds. Now, what's happened since, and the responses to that, the consultations were generally in favour, as you can see, so 100% in favour of the model that we go from there. This was the high needs block transfer, for which there was overall approval. This is about the growth fund, which I think there was agreement for, and this was about falling roles, but we'll come on to that later if that's okay. So we've had an increase in pupil numbers and estimated growth funding and some information around falling roles, but that means overall there's more money, and so this is what we'd like to propose for Schools Forum to think about. So this is the consultation model against our now proposed model. So the key first thing is, rather than setting minimum funding guarantee for all schools at 0.25%, we'd like to set minimum funding guarantee for all schools at 0.5%. So that's the maximum we're allowed to set the minimum funding guarantee, and also cap gains at 0.5%, which is the highest we can do again, and scaling still at 100%. So that would then be affordable, still with the same 0.5% transfer into high needs block. Now, with the new money, if we took the old approach, we'd have ended up with over 3 million in growth fund. This gives us more than we initially planned in growth fund, but given what we've said about increasing sufficiency, we'd like to suggest that that would be a worthwhile thing to do to enable us to put money into creating new provision where it's appropriate to do so. Clearly, it doesn't disappear out of the schools block; it just sits there at the end of the year, gets wrapped up. And then the falling pupil roll is still the same, and we'll come back to that later in the meeting. The schools block overall, on both models is the same, and the movement of funds is the same. So what we're suggesting, Chair, sorry if that wasn't terribly clear, is in the initial model, using the money that we now know we're going to get through the budget, this is what the outcome would be. But we're suggesting we increase the money that goes to schools to ensure we fund at the highest levels we can. We let the growth fund grow a little bit to support us in creating new provision where we can, and we continue with a 0.5% transfer into high needs block. So that's the proposal we would like Forum's view on. And I'm sorry if that's not clear enough. Soraya and Yoki would be able to answer detailed questions much better than me, probably.
Okay, and is that superseding one of the votes in relation to the high needs transfer now, or is that just wrap it all up together?
That was our approach, Chair. We thought if we wrapped it all up together, then it would be easier to see as a model, which is why we're doing it this way. I mean, we're happy to take it piece by piece if that helps. But like I say, I think what we've got is the consultation model that's got a number of decisions in it and the recommended model. And if we can wrap those up, then that would be great if it's more efficient for everybody.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to do that. We've got the de-delegations, which we'll deal with shortly and separately, but we can wrap these into the agenda. Are there comments from colleagues? Any questions in relation to this part of it? Personally, I think the split is better, having an MFG at 0.5%, given the pressures that we're seeing coming through the system for all schools. They're going to be more than that. They're going to need to have a reasonable minimum guaranteed funding. So I think that's a useful model to adopt. Are there any other comments from colleagues on this? Okay. So if we know that, I think, Neil, you need a vote on the specifically on the transfer to high needs block, don't you?
Yeah, and establishing the MFG and the things that go with it. But like I say, I think we can do it on block. Are you happy with that as a proposal? And then we can go from there if that's okay.
Yeah. Okay, and that's for all forum members, this one.
Yeah.
Yes. So can I ask you to, if you are happy to approve the proposal that Neil's laid down, which is the 0.5% transfer with a 0.5 MFG and 0.5. James, you got a question? Yes, you are happy, I think.
Yeah, sorry, that is yes, I'm happy rather than a question. Sorry.
Yeah, okay. If everyone, if you could put your hand up if you're happy to adopt this. I am. So I think that's everyone.
That's unanimous.
Okay, that's lovely. There you go. Thanks, Neil.
So thank you for that, Chair and colleagues. Clearly, what we'll do is bring you back an updated version when we've got the final budget to the next meeting. But I think the principles would still apply, and it's unlikely it will move very much from what you've got in front of you because the data is now in place. So thank you for that, and thank you for the clarity.
Okay, lovely. Thanks for that, Neil. That's gone through quite a lot of information. If we go on to item 8 then, mainstream schools funding. Soraya, I know we've kind of probably covered off some of this item, but if you'd like to work through.
So with the mainstream funding formula consultation, it's part of that presentation that Neil's just presented. So we don't have another report on that one. Okay,
I'll move on, to be fair, because we've just gone through and voted on that then. So item 9 is the national funding formula. This is where we come back to our maintain members for this, I think, and de-delegations. But yeah, if you'd like to, I think this is yours.
Yes. So this is for a report that gives School Forum an update to the consultation on NNC's proposals for Central School Services block. As reported in the October School Forum, the CSSB block is estimated to have a reduction of 221k in 24-25. NNC has received a provisional allocation of 3.06 million in 24-25 compared to 3.28 in 23-24. Table 2.3 in the report breaks this down, and the table under section 2.4 shows a change in CSSB funding over the 2 years. The main part of this report is under section 3, which gives School Forum members a breakdown of the consultation responses. So we had we've had 18 schools respond to the 4 questions relating to the Central Schools block. As you can see in the table, question 1 for agreement of further dedelegation of education functions from maintained schools to help cover the shortfall in the CSSB was a tie. So I'm asking that a vote is put to members today of maintained schools only to decide if this proposal will be accepted or not. As for questions 2, 3, and 4, the majority of participants agreed, and school forum members are asked to note this. The outcome of this consultation will guide the determination of the final Central Schools block budget for 24-25, following the DfE finance settlement announced later this month. So if I can ask for a vote, please, on that question. I think you're on mute, Chair.
Yeah, sorry, Paul, you're muted.
Sorry, this is maintained schools only on point 1, yeah?
Just on question 1, please.
Thanks. So, so the question is, I think we have 3 members now, Marie, James, and Lisa, this is applicable to. If you agree that, would you, if you can vote, this is obviously where there's been a mixed opinion on the limited consultation on whether you think there should be further dedelegation to meet the shortfall in funding. There's obviously quite a mixed picture here. So if I can ask for you to say if you are in favour, if you put your hand up, if you're in favour of a further dedelegation. Did we have the amount that would be the further dedelegation?
We didn't have an amount in there. No, we'll bring back amounts and figures to the next school forum meeting if it's agreed.
Right. Okay. So that might, at this stage, you might want to see that what it actually means. First, Marie, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I agree. I think a little bit more detail is needed on the impact of that. And I also don't feel that the consultation was publicised widely enough, or we were reminded about it often enough, because for only 4 LA schools to respond, I think either that email has got lost in junk or people perhaps haven't understood the significance. So if the detail isn't there, I don't feel we can vote today. And I wondered if the consultation could be rerun or extended with the detail added and added to the head teacher's bulletin every week so that people understand the importance of them replying and having a say.
Okay.
Yeah.
We can. I think the only issue is with another consultation is that everyone breaks up for Christmas, and then our January meeting's quite tight in that sense to bring back the consultation responses. So I'm not sure how many schools will respond again. In that sense, what will the take up be? But I can take it back and I come back with some numbers to the January school forum, if that helps.
Yeah, I think
that we really need numbers to make an informed decision. And if we're representing LA schools and only 10% roughly have replied, it's very hard for us to make a vote without all of the facts. Thank you.
No, I'd agree with that. If Marie, if your colleagues are happy to look at that vote with the detail of actually what it is, what the amount is and the quantum is at the January meeting.
That's fine, thank you. So other than that, the questions 2, 3 and 4 are agreed, so we'll bring that back in the January meeting, how the budget's set up.
Yeah, okay. I think because the other ones 2, 3 and 4, they are they're full forum, aren't they? They're not just about delegation. So I think that's a bit different to when we're asking for a further dedelegation on what that means for maintained schools, as opposed to where we do have a bit more information about the existing budgets and the historical commitments are set out in the tables. So has anyone got any questions, or would we be able, in relation to questions 2, 3 and 4 for the whole forum members, be able to make a decision on the use of contribution to combined services budget. I don't think not answering question 1 is going to stop us answering the rest, from what I can see of it, because that would be a new and an initial dedelegation if it were approved by the maintained schools. Does that make sense to colleagues? Are you happy to go with the consultation results in relation to the use of historical commitments budget, the ongoing responsibilities budget, and the use of contribution to the combined services? Can I ask you if you're happy to vote in favour of those? If you can put your hand up, please. I am.
Okay, yeah, that's noted.
Against? Or
sorry, sorry, it was just the hands were up. Yeah, I've got that. That's none.
You got everyone. Or abstention? No.
Okay, yeah, that's unanimous then.
Okay, super. All right, so so it's just bringing back with a bit more detail around question 1 about further dedelegation.
That's fine, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now if I can ask in relation to the paper, the next one, which is dedelegation again, which is again for maintain members only. If we can, who's presenting this paper? Neil, do you want to just set out the report, and then I can ask our union colleagues to, if they'd like to provide some further representation before we take a vote.
Thank you, Chair. So as we set out at the last meeting, this dedelegation relates to trade union facilities time in order to allow maintained schools to pool funding to support their access to trade union colleagues to support members within their school. This is something that's been going on historically. Lots of almost all local authorities do it in one form or another. Last year we had quite a lot of debate and conversation about the existence of this part, and it was agreed that it should continue. And trade unions at that time presented to the forum a paper around how that's used and how it supports their work. So the proposal that was consulted on this time was, 1, should we continue with the school's trade union facilities pot of money, and 2, should we increase it in line with school teachers' pay award, which is 6.5%, both of which came back with a positive response, although not unanimous. One comment was about it not being so effective for larger schools, so a secondary maintained school made that comment, and then we had another comment about whether it was appropriate to increase the amount that's given or not. But overall, in both questions, there was a majority in favour. Having received those responses and reviewed the position, our ask of the forum is that we do continue with the trade union facilities pot of money, and that is increased in line with the proposal that was put forward in the paper. So, like I say, we've been through this, lots of detail, won't go in anymore. I can see Richard's got his hand up, so from a trade union perspective, he might want to comment on the paper itself.
Yeah, thank you, Neil. Just to say, I'm not spending a lot of time on this because of the recommendation. We are grateful for that. We're grateful for Neil to put on the make clear the benefits and the impacts of school if they don't take the budget up. The larger secondary school, I'm really surprised that they don't feel it's applicable to them, because they're saying that actually all the benefits and impacts that is stated on the paper at 54 on page 54 don't apply to them, which I'm pretty sure they do. I would also encourage that the fact that the paying for facility time, I don't work for the union, I work for the local authority, and the facility time budget pays for me to be released from my normal duties to do things like, when you want to consult on policies, you have a legal duty to do that with the unions. The same with job evaluations, reorganisations, TUPE consultations, terms and conditions, and also the big link between yourselves and your HR providers and the local authority. So there is a concern of lack of understanding, I think, from some colleagues about what union facilities time. Can I just ask two very quick questions, Neil? How many maintained schools were consulted with?
Sorry, well, all of them. All the consultation went to all of them, so all 33,
Yeah, okay.
I think it is.
Okay,
now.
thank you. And again, like we've seen on the surveys, it's a very kind of poor response. Did the secondary school? I don't ask you to name them, obviously, but did they give any kind of context in which they felt it wasn't applicable to them?
No, the comment was very brief, only in relation to it was not as effective within a scale of budget that they were operating, I think was the comment they made.
Okay, thank you. Well, there's no other further comments from me. I urge you to support the increase so I can be released from my day job to support schools in all those benefits that are noted on the paper, and also those extra ones that I've just noted. I'll give way to my other union colleagues if they want to comment.
Yeah, have we got who else would like to say anything? So I think that's it. Thanks, Richard.
Thank you.
So I'll ask members again. This is for our maintained members to vote for the delegation. So I think the recommendation is to increase the funding rate to 379 in line with the teachers' pay settlement. So can I ask for our colleagues all in favour from the maintained sector? Can you pop your hand up, please? Right, brilliant. James, brilliant. Have you got that, Raj?
Yeah, I've got that.
I think that's unanimous, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, for me. Okay, thank you. Thanks very much, Richard.
Thank you for your support.
Thank you. If we move on then to school effectiveness.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I'll be brief. I think we went through this at the last meeting. This is a continuation of a delegation for the support of the work of the school effectiveness team. So Jo Hutchinson and her team, and the breadth of support they're able to offer maintain schools directly, which is over and above obviously what they're able to offer academies. Again, the proposal was that we continue to delegate and that we increase that by the same percentage, given for the same reasons. Again, both questions were answered favourably, and again, we would recommend and ask for members to approve the delegation at the higher rate as was consulted on.
Yep. So I think that's quite clear. There was one comment, Neil, that I picked out from this when I was looking through the paper. It seems to be quite primary focused. Is there, in the paper anyway, but is there an offering for the secondary school as well? Are they supported through the school improvement?
Yeah, they certainly are. Yes, we do a lot of work with them, and we have colleagues with specialism in that area. So yes, I would say that is the case.
Okay. So Maria, have you got a question, or are you raising your hand to approve?
Well, no, a question, please. I just wondered how, whilst I understand the increase in line with inflation to pay, employees, I wonder how that sits alongside the decrease in the school standards and effectiveness budget of £394,000, and therefore what support local authority schools will get from a SIP. If we pay a bit more, are we actually going to get less?
So this is a good question again, Marie. Thank you for that. So there is, start on a different point. The DFE have scrapped what's called used to be called the LAM grant, which is the grant that supports the work that we do with maintained schools. this goes back to the prior conversation about the new dedelegation, about whether we want to do that. However, in working with colleagues in finance and councillors, we have asked for additional funding into the school effectiveness team from the council to support the ongoing work that would enable us to continue service levels and obviously improve and look to move forward. And whilst the council's budget hasn't been finalised yet and won't be until the end of February, that remains a pressure that's been identified, and I think will be considered by councillors. So I'm confident, or hopeful might be a better word, that we will find that shortfall being made up through a different route, and that this funding will enable us to, in the same way it has previously, top that up to enable the service levels to be at least maintained, if not improved.
Sorry, Neil, I'm still not clear how a £71,000 school effectiveness budget for 24-25 would be able to provide the same level of service that we get this year, and therefore is that shortfall being met by asking for the extra, or are there going to be a reduction in the number of SIPs available to local authority schools? And at what point is that sort of critical mass going to be lost with schools joining academy trusts? So
there are two parts to this again. So there's I have made a case through the council budget process that the council should put general fund, council money, into the school effectiveness team to enable us to support the process and continue with the service we currently have. I can't tell you the outcome of that yet, because the council's budget is not considered by council until the 23rd, 24th of February. But informally, I would say there has been a positive response to that and a want to continue to support maintain schools, because the council is very supportive of maintain schools. So that will bridge a lot of that gap. Beyond that, if we want to put more money into it, that's the question that we're going to come back to you with later, to increase that further through an increased transfer from the CSSB pot, which we talked about earlier. So in answer to your question, yes, if things progress as I expect, I believe we will be able to maintain the school effectiveness service and potentially improve it with this level of transfer from maintained schools. Because the council will put more money than it's historically or previously put into the pot. So we'll have more money just from a different source.
Okay, and is that presuming that schools will academise, will remain with the LA? I know the white paper's been pulled, but there was talk of, you know, no school being in local authority control by 2030, and I know you've done some modelling around what that looks like. Yep. What's your thought process on that? Because as a local authority school, we really need to know what future support is available or not available, so we can plan ahead.
So our intention is to maintain support. We are committed to maintain schools at the moment, and to at least maintain the level of support that we are able to provide. As you say, the white paper was pulled, so the future of LA Mats and all the things that went along with that is entirely unclear. But we have a pipeline of schools that are thinking about academising. We work with them, and our position on that remains exactly as it always has, which is neutral, and with the question that we ask being, how will that improve the outcomes for the children, young people and families that you serve? Okay, that's our question about academisation. It's not a principled, we believe in academies or we don't. It's about how is that going to improve the outcomes that you're able to deliver, and that will continue to be the case. But certainly for the coming year, which this budget relates to, we will continue to support maintain schools, and our position, and members and councillors' position, remains that we would want maintain schools to stay with the local authority and support them as best we can.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Maria, for your question. I had got your question down there as well. So thanks for thanks for picking that up. I think you've covered that off as well. So with that in mind, in relation to this, are members happy to approve the increase in the dedelegation? And just to reiterate, the point that Neil's made is this is essentially to maintain the provision as is, which has the question mark about whether the council, through their own general funds, make up the difference in the main block in CCSG in CCB block, or whether we around that. So this is just to maintain the facilities that we have at the moment, assuming the council fund the reductions in the historic funding. So can you tell me if you are in favour of the increase? If you could raise your hand, please. Thanks. Maria, yeah. James, yeah. Brilliant, thank you. And have you got that, Raj?
Yeah, I've got that.
Okay, super. Okay, if we move on then to the next one, which is around we've done item 12, haven't we? I think it's around the growth fund now, isn't it?
It's Chair, that's me again.
Yeah.
Okay, so couple of things on this. Firstly, I think both of these papers, one was circulated very late and one wasn't circulated. So I think we need to come back to the next meeting to have a conversation about these. There's still work going on these. We wanted to have the conversation at this meeting and we wanted there to be clarity, but we don't think it's reasonable given the notice that you've had and the lack of sight of the papers. So you will have seen that the pot of money for falling roles is actually very small, about 140,000. So it's not a huge amount of money that we're talking about, and we'll come back with more specifics on that next time, if that's okay. The growth fund is obviously bigger and more established. We've had the growth fund before, and I talked about that when I talked about the proposed model that we put on that would deliver £2.7 million into this. Again, what we're proposing is very much more of the same, but we want to go away and think about that and come back with a clearer paper for you. So you've got the outcomes of the consultation, I think, in the growth fund paper, but my proposal, if everybody's happy with it, is that we will bring both of those papers back to the next meeting for a proper conversation, because I don't think that we're in a position to do that this time, if that's acceptable, Chair.
Yeah, it is from my point of view. There's a couple of things, if I mention that, if you can make sure, they may well be in the paper that you do, but if not, if you can make sure that they are. There was a question I had from one of the members about Stanton Cross being funded. But I think that ties into the question I've got, which is around, with a more substantive paper, if you can make sure you're demonstrating the schools that the growth fund is likely to be applicable to, or where you're planning that will be, and what that is, as well as the rates and the criteria. So whether there's an increase in the rates, whether the rates and criteria change, whether they've included any inflation risk from last year. So the more substantive paper on how many schools qualify, and what is what are the rates that qualify, and in which way do they qualify, for how many pupils? Is it for additional full cohort, full group, part group? And again, if there is any anomalies relating to new and growing schools, which I think is where a member's asked about Stanton Cross specifically, that you've included that in the paper.
Yeah, I'm aware of the issue at Stanton Cross, and it is a principled decision for the forum to think about. And if I set it out very briefly, then it's clear, which is where you have a new school coming into being through whatever route. In order for them to be able to plan effectively, is it reasonable to assume that they open full in reception and fund them as if they open full in reception, so that they can employ teachers in advance and those sorts of things? And if you do that, for how many years would you do that? So because of the questions that have been raised around Stanton Cross, I've spoken to other local authorities. The general view seems to be that local authorities do that to give the new school the best start in having some certainty over the first few years, which I understand, but for a period of 3 years. So, obviously being the infant bit of the primary school, it's a primary school, whatever. So I'm happy to come back with that. I think we will have to, between myself, Yoki and others, we'll have to have further conversations with Stanton Cross to clarify the situation for them, because there was some confusion. I think we need to make that really clear for them. I am meeting with the head and the CEO of the trust regularly to go through that. But like I say, in terms of the application of growth, we do in the fullness of time and in the paper need to be clear about what protection we want to give new schools, no matter of how they've come into being. And like I say, I'll reference, like I say, what other local authorities do as examples. But what's being requested and talked about does not seem out of the ordinary as an approach to ensuring schools are able to start as effectively as possible. And the cost should be fairly minimal, of course, because you'd hope they'd be full anyway.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of things around that one specifically, but you're right, the policy needs to reflect how you deal with this as a system, as opposed to reacting to a specific, and that will be helpful in the policy. But colleagues may or may not know, but when you open a new free school, you open, and until the school's full up, you're on estimate funding, which means there's an in-year adjustment based on your census. So whatever funding's agreed, if it was opened as a primary or two-form entry and you were funded for 60 pupils and you only had 35, then there would be a pupil number adjustment and a clawback of that funding in year. It's not based on lag funding, which most of the system is. That said, if you year on year were having reduced numbers, then the school and the trust should be able to manage that, because they will be doing mixed year groups and the like in the same way that any small school model would do. But looking at how you address that as part of the free school programme and the capacity is something that generically should be in the policy. So I will move, if members are happy, that we postpone any votes on the falling roles budget and the growth fund and the application of those until we have a more substantive paper at the next meeting, which will bring us on then to item 15, unless there's any one contrary to that view. Then we'll move on to permanent exclusions. Thanks, Steve.
Okay. Again, we went through this at last meeting, so I won't go through it in huge amounts of detail. This paper just sets out the policy by which we will claw back funding from schools for pupils that are excluded. That obviously contributes to, though by no means meets, as you've seen from the budget, the cost of AP provision, those other things that we put in place. The proposal that was put to schools through the consultation was to maintain the current formula as it stands. That was, I think, unanimously supported through the consultation, and so we propose that we continue with the existing formula for clawing back funding for excluded pupils.
Yeah, are there any comments from members on this? I note that there isn't a vote required on this.
Well, it's a continuation. We're not changing anything, so it would only be if you as a group wanted to change it. But if you don't, then we shall continue as we currently are.
Right. Okay. Now, Marie, have you got a question on this in relation to the process for the panels, or is that
not
different?
Exclusion? No, sorry, that was the early help locality funding panel,
okay.
not exclusion.
Not exclusion. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Are there any comments on this? From my point of view, I think the policy stands. It doesn't cover the costs that are incurred when there is an exclusion, and it. But I think there is a balance there, and I think the balance that we have as Schools Forum is effective. So, is there anyone else who'd like to comment on the exclusions policy? No? Okay, I'll move us on to agenda item 16, the early years budget.
Thank you, Chair. The paper I've got today asks Schools Forum members for budget approval on the indicative early years budget for 24-25. Table 1 of the report details the indicative rates, the differences between 22 and 23 to 24 and 25. You'll see in Table 1 that this is also inclusive of the 2 new funding streams that come into the local authority. 15 hours for eligible working families of 2-year-olds from the 1st of April, and working families with babies from 9 months from the 1st of September. The rates are included, as well as a deprivation supplement for those 2 rates. So table 1. So the extended entitlement for children from 9 months is indicative £9.62 per hour per child. The deprivation supplement to be added on top of that is the same as deprivation supplement we currently have, which is 31p per eligible child. The disadvantaged 2-year-olds we have already. That's a separate funding stream, and that's increasing by £1.87 to £7.62 for eligible children. The extended entitlement 2-year-old base rate, which comes in on the 1st of April, is £6.75. That also gets deprivation, which, as I said before, is 31p. The universal entitlement for 3 and 4-year-olds, which we currently have, is an increase of 63p per hour at £4.85. The 3 and 4-year-old extended, that's for working families, the base rate is the same at £4.85. We, as previously discussed in last January Schools Forum, we talked about removing the notional send, and we have actually removed that this time. The TPPG, which is pensions for schools and academies only, and that's on the first 15 hours, that's 5p, which I believe is the same as this year. The early years pupil premium, again, eligible 3 and 4-year-olds, that's 68p, which is an increase of 6p per hour. Disability Access Fund, which is eligible children who are in receipt of DLA, that's moving to £910 per child per year, and that's an increase of £82 per child per year. And the maintained nursery supplement, including the pay and pensions, is £6.23, which is an increase of 92p per hour. We are currently consulting, as we are required to do so. That went live out to the sector on the 11th of December, and I believe it closes second week into January. The results and finding from that consultation will form part of our updated report, which will be brought to forum in January 2024. I'll open to any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Colleagues? Kelly, I'll ask one question if I can. In relation to the rates, because there are some reasonable increases in the rates, but how does that tie into the costs for early years is always really tight. And with a lot of staff on the lowest of the wages and approaching minimum wage, the increases in that, how do the increase in the rates reflect the increase in the costs that the early years providers are facing, particularly around inflation and around increases in minimum wage?
Unfortunately, I don't have a detailed answer to that, Chair. I do know that the amount we receive as a local authority is passported out as much as we can. I will take that back to our seniors to look into it, and I will be meeting with the Department for Education in the next couple of weeks.
Thank you. Lisa, you probably got a really good grip on what this means for the nurseries. Would you like to, you got your hand up.
Hi, Kelly. Thank you for all the figures. It's really good to see them so early. It really enables nurseries to budget, so I really appreciate that. I know that it's still got to go through everything, but really good. I just noticed that on these figures it doesn't include that supplement payment that all nurseries got in September that you forwarded through to us. And obviously that really made a difference. So whilst these increases look quite good, if you include that supplement, not so much. I do really appreciate the fact that the council's passing through as much as you can to us, but I think it's still going to be tight. As you know, there is a recruitment crisis in early years as well. So I just wanted to note that. Can I ask why the difference? So obviously a deprived or disadvantaged 2-year-old, £7.62, and a 2-year-old from a working family, £6.75. I mean, I know there might be some extra work to do around a disadvantaged 2-year-old, but they can also be with working families. So, I mean, that's a huge difference for 2 children who could, say, live on the same street. Can I ask why?
You certainly can. So I'll answer your first question. The supplement that you received at the beginning of September only covers 2 funding blocks. So it covers the autumn block and the spring block. Once the new funding rates come in from the 1st of April, that supplement is included in the increase in base rate. The second question, disadvantaged 2-year-olds and the extended entitlement for 2-year-olds is 2 completely different funding streams. Now, we have posed the question to the DfE, what happens if you have a child who is eligible for both? And if a child is eligible for both, they will be put under the disadvantaged category and not the working families entitlement.
Thank you for that answer. I still personally don't see that it can make that much difference per hour, and I'm sure you agree with me. You know, all 2-year-olds, especially now, you know, really need a lot of input, which we're more than happy to do.
I will certainly feed that back to the DfE for you, Lisa. You know, I meet with them every 6 weeks, so I'll feed that back.
It just feels quite discriminative to me, but and thank you for the point you said about the supplement payment. But the supplement payment was put in September, I think, because we were really struggling so much, and so to give us a little increase on top of that, we're still going to be struggling. So I would love you to take back that we kind of need more. You know, though we really appreciate that someone is maybe starting to listen to the sector, and obviously there are a few little bits coming through. But thank you. They're the questions that I had.
Thank you, Lisa.
Sandra.
Hi there. I'll try and be really quick and really brief. It's encouraging, isn't it, that funding is coming in. It's an increase, which is fantastic. The cost in that sector has increased significantly more than what these increases are showing. So that, from my perspective, is another example, I suppose, of that's wonderful. Thank you very much. However, staffing costs they're just blowing our minds at the moment in terms of us in schools trying to break even. So independent nurseries and early years settings, I just don't know how they're managing, and I know lots are not surviving. This, where you might be able to make a profit, and I say a profit to pile back into resourcing your settings, is becoming really, really challenging. And I think, Kelly, send that message back, I think, loud and clear. That would be really appreciated.
It's one of my main agenda items for the DfE. Please, can we have more?
And I wonder also, we're talking about ratios of 1 to 4 here, maybe 1 to 5. So we're talking about per hour, tiny increases. Really, if you're thinking about 4 children with an increase of, 31p per hour over a 3-hour session or whatever, we're talking really tiny amounts of money. So to be able to well resource your setting and staff appropriately your setting, I think, to even think that we might grow to take those 9-month-olds and more 2-year-olds is quite daunting for a lot of settings, and I'm concerned that it's not going to be sufficient.
I completely understand, and I hear you, and I will be taking that back to the DfE as always.
Okay, that's good. Kelly, can I ask, when did the DfE publish the funding rates?
They published the indicative funding rates on November 23rd.
Right. Okay, so when you are going back to DfE, because the timing of these things is appalling, given that I know they're indicative and we run through them, but you get national funding formula rates for your primary age and mainstream schools much earlier. And so to have indicative funding rates coming out with, you know, this late, when particularly around the maintained sector, you've got to be putting your budgets together and the consultations will only finish in January, which doesn't leave a whole lot of time for colleagues to be able to actually plan. Perhaps we can take back to the DFE something. It's always a harder question asking for more money, although I think it's the right thing to do. But to look at their processes, they want us to plan. I was in a meeting recently with the chief executive of the SFA, and he was talking about his priorities for improving the processes and making it easier and making it better for financial planning. And I think we need to go back and say you're failing miserably when it comes to early years. You're not giving us any opportunity to plan whatever the outcome of the funding availability is, and that at least they should be able to improve that. If you could take that message back as well, please.
I've been feeding that back for a number of years.
Yeah. Okay, I'll probably look at feeding that back directly into the ESFA, into the head of the ESFA as well. Lisa, have you got any more questions, or is it a legacy hand you got there?
I just wanted to say that I do agree with Sandra, and the wages are going up significantly. Obviously, I'm in the private sector, not going up enough, obviously, but I'm just agreeing with Sandra that it is extremely hard, and we need all the support we can get, and I'm sure Kelly is pushing for that, but we really, really need it. Really, anything makes a huge difference.
Yeah. Okay, are there any more comments for Kelly? Before we move on, there isn't a vote on this. It will be out to consultation. The vote will be at the next meeting.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Kelly. Neil, if we can look at the notional send, I think it's yours.
It is, Chair. Yeah, thank you very much. So I'll start with an apology again. I think we did this last time. This is not a very well titled report, but we stuck with it for consistency's sake, so we knew it was the same thing. To recap what we said last time, this is a change, shall we say, in regulations or recommendations from the DFE, where they are suggesting we could look at each individual school, look at their notional SEND budget, compare that to the actual requirement to meet the £6,000 first contribution to each HCP, and where there is a shortfall between 80% of the notional SEND budget and the requirement for the HCP, we can make up the difference. Now, councils have been able to do this historically. There has been a change to actually funding and recommending this. And so that's why we've gone out to consultation on that this year. Now, this might seem entirely counterintuitive, because this is basically saying, let's spend some more money out of the high needs block. You know, there isn't another pot. This is where it comes from. So, you know, in doing this, we are adding to the pressure within the high needs block. But on the other hand, for those schools that are impacted by this, it is a significant issue and a concern for them. And I have had feedback from schools about that. You'll see from the report that the consultation response was very positive. I think 17 out of 18 supported this. Obviously, the figures in the report are indicative only, and obviously we'd look at updating those as we went through. As I've already spoken about at length, the number of HCPs is increasing, and there still will be other schools that might fall in, or some that fall out of this over time. But like I say, it's something that we could have done historically, but didn't feel was the right thing. Recommendations, regulations have moved on. I think it's the right thing to do now, potentially, and it's for Forum to take a decision of whether we implement this as a formula. As a reminder, my suggestion was we implement this basically straight away, rather than waiting for next year, but that also is up to the Forum if you'd like us to think about how we did that. So hopefully that's clear. Like I say, the title of the paper is not entirely helpful. It's not about changing notional SEND. It's about assessing whether notional SEND is sufficient to meet the HCP contributions required and then topping up where it isn't. So, like I say, hopefully that clarifies what this is all about.
Thanks, Neil. Comments from colleagues? Marie?
Thank you, Chair. I suppose, Neil, given what you said earlier about the really steep increase in the number of EHCPs being processed each month, surely we're heading to a direction where nearly all schools could fall into that criteria, and therefore where does all that extra money come from?
So again, a very good question. So as I say, there is only one pot of money. This money will come out and make the deficit in that high needs block bigger. But what it does aim to do is address individual schools' pressures that they face, where for whatever reason, maybe they're very inclusive, maybe they serve a deprived area, maybe they just happen to have a proliferation of EHCPs within their area, where they are managing a significant demand in order to support for EHCP. So I guess yes, as the EHCP numbers increase, more schools will come into this, but you'll see from the report, I think it was 4 or 5 were on the initial figures. I mean, what we can do is I can report this back at Schools Forum regularly, so you can see if there is an increasing number. But as I've said, I suggest we do this at the end of each term rather than annually, because numbers do fluctuate and it's only reasonable to do so. And like I said, I'm happy to bring back, you know, whether this is rapidly ratcheting up, you know, we go from 4 to 40 quite quickly, then that would be a concern, absolutely right.
And I guess, sorry, secondary question, is it a percentage of pupil roll or is it above national? What's going to be the threshold to trigger this mechanism being put into place?
So the comparison is look at your notional SEND, okay, which you're informed of through your funding formula, and then look at the number of EHCPs you've got times £6,000. And if the number of EHCPs times £6,000 is greater than 80% of your notional SEND, then that shortfall will be made up.
So I guess is that a perverse incentive for schools to try and get more EHCPs to get double the money, which is against what we want in terms of assessment and ed psychs and the availability of people to do the RSA? I know the intention is right and I fully agree with the intention. I just wonder if it could end up creating more of a problem than it solves.
That's a good question again, and I have had conversation with schools who felt they should be in this category but aren't, because the children with additional needs don't have any HCP. You know, whilst they are putting in additional support to support those child, absolutely, that's at school support level, not EHCP level. So you might have a view that that would encourage them to go for an EHCP. I hope not. But, you know, in lots of what we do, we have to assume that schools act appropriately and fairly within the context and take the right course of action for the individual pupil. But like I say, again, all I can say is if we put this in place, I'm happy to monitor it. And if we feel like it's becoming a perverse incentive or being used in a way it shouldn't be, then we can review that through the forum.
Thank you.
I think to be fair as well, Neil, with it, the counter side of that is as schools funding has become tighter and tighter, where schools have had the headroom to be able to provide for the needs of children in their school with higher needs, there's a danger that as the funding's become tighter, they don't provide for those needs that aren't part of an EHCP because they don't have the resources to be able to adequately do that. So having a mechanism, it might lead to some EHCPs, but it might also, the counter is, without that, it might lead to children not having the support that they need because there isn't the headroom in the system to be able to provide that without funding. So I would also be concerned, and again, I've seen it with some schools, particularly small schools, where they are doing a brilliant job in inclusion and are being able to provide lots of extra support, but just simply don't have the cash to continue that, so are tending to move around or not be able to provide the support. So I think it's something to look at and monitor and see how that affects the numbers through the course of 12 months. Now, do you need a vote on this?
Yeah.
Okay. Sandra.
So I'm sorry, just before going to vote, so I'm completely clear. This is not anything to do with special arrangement funding, is it?
No, so absolutely not. Excuse me. Special arrangement fund, as I spoke earlier, is specifically used to avoid cost. Okay, by working with a school, a special school particularly, usually, to say the alternative to this is to go to an independent school at 80 grand a pop if we give you a smaller amount of money. Now, I'm not very happy in using that, but you have to. It has to be done in order to costs. If I hope that answers your question. If I go back to Paul's question, the challenge I've had from some schools is, does that mean I'm meant to manage the ambient underlying SEN in my school with 20% of my notional SEND budget? And I absolutely accept that, but clearly there has to be a line drawn somewhere. And like I say, again, we can look at it in future years, and this is the rate that is suggested and other councils use. So we'll start with that and see how we get on. But I do accept entirely 20% of the notional SEND budget to meet the needs of pupils without any HCP across the whole school is not a huge amount. No, accepting that notional SEND budget is, as its name suggests, notional and not a separate pot of money. But nonetheless, I take your point entirely.
Thank you. I'm done.
Okay, lovely. So if we can say, in relation to this policy, and is the school forum happy to fund the shortfalls from the high needs block where 80% of the notional SEND funding has already been expended? I think it's a proposal. So in favour, if you put your hands up, everyone who's in favour. Fantastic.
Yeah, I've got that.
I think that's everyone, isn't it?
Yeah, unanimous.
Okay, so there's no one against and no abstentions. Lovely, thank you. Thanks, members. Speech and language, Neil.
Apologies, it's me again, members. So this paper is not a decision, it's for information. That's the starting point. So speech and language therapies are delivered by the health services, you'll be aware. And in Northamptonshire, historically, the health service or the ICB have funded the entire delivery of speech and language therapy across the piece. Now, we know that what is delivered is insufficient. We know there's a capacity gap. We know there's much more that we could do. In undertaking a review, and we've just started this review, there's much more to be done. It's clear that there is a statutory responsibility for local authorities to fund what's called Part F of speech and language therapy. And Northamptonshire County and North and West have never done that. And so Health have reasonably come to us and said, this is a statutory responsibility that you're not funding. You need to contribute to this. Through negotiation, we've agreed that that won't start until next year. And we've also agreed that Health won't reduce their contribution to speech and language. So this is not Health taking some money out and us putting some money in. This is true additional money within the service. So that's a good thing as well. And we've also agreed that the totality of funding in speech and language will be the subject of a commissioning review going forward. So we'll be looking at how it's delivered, what it delivers, all those sorts of things going forward. So what we should be able to deliver with this additional money is additionality and greater access to the service. I'm not suggesting this is going to fix the problems with the service, but it should deliver greater access across Northamptonshire. So you'll see that the request from us, which is equal to the request from the West, I think is £240,000. Again, it's coming out the high needs block. Again, it's going to increase the pressure, but it's a statutory responsibility, so I don't think we've got any choice. And it is addressing what I think all of us would recognise as a weakness in the system in Northants, which is about access to speech and language. So, like I say, this is not a decision because it's a statutory responsibility. We've got to do it. It's for information. It can be seen alongside the conversation about the high needs block earlier about another pressure. But like I said, I think it's the right thing to do. It'll be £243,000 next year, and moving on, and we'll come back to forum to talk about the commissioning process when we get to the next stage of looking at speech and language more generally. So you've got some information in the paper before you. Hopefully that sets it out clearly. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take them. But like I say, this is not a decision-making moment for the forum, only for information.
Okay. Thank you. Lisa.
It's not really a question, but just to know that when we put children through for speech and language, we're not seeing them actually receive that. And they've already left the school, so we might put them through at 2 or 3, but they haven't actually received anything for 2 or 3 years. And then they go off to school and they still haven't received anything. So there are huge delays. We do have SENIF now, which if we have 4 or 5 children, we can private ask for funding to get speech and language, but obviously that's at a high cost because it's a private provider. So I just thought I'd add that note, that's all. So people know what it is really like out there.
Yeah, and I absolutely recognise that, and that's what we're doing, the joint commissioning, to try and stop that happening. This is an extra £500,000 investment in speech and language locally, so 240 odd from us, 240 from the West. So there will be additionality, there will be greater access, but I'm absolutely not promising it's going to fix the problems that you're identifying, because there is such huge demand, and there will be, you know, a time lag for recruitment. But I absolutely recognise what you're saying.
Thank you. Thanks, Lisa. Is there any other questions for Neil on this? Okay. That brings us down to, I think, any other business, Neil. And I think you've notified of a briefing in relation to schools pay and grading.
Excuse me. Yes. Sorry, me again. So this relates only to maintained schools again. Sorry, there's been lots of those this time. So as colleagues may be aware, the local authority in coming into being took on lots of different pay and grading scales. So there's obviously the predecessor councils and the county council and all those sorts of things, and has been going through what's called a pay and grading review to set up its own pay and grading structure, which all staff would, over time, migrate onto. Now, maintained schools, who are employees of the council, and VC schools and, you know, all those subsets, have been left until late in the process. So that's now. So information will be coming out to maintained school heads about the process that needs to be followed in order for all staff on non-teaching grades to be assessed to go on to what will be the new Northamptonshire pay and grading scales. I'm not going to underplay the amount of work this is going to take. I think this is quite a big job. This means looking at every member of staff who's on a local government pay scale and looking at assessing their role, putting that against a job family, moving that through. There will be consultation. HR and colleagues are wanting to set up a meeting with heads to talk about it specifically. So I'm not an expert, so I can't answer detailed questions today. But as this is the schools forum, and as it has a clear funding implication, in as much as if that means that pay scales go up, that schools will be facing a budget pressure, and it absolutely won't mean that pay scales are going down. That's not how this is going to work. It's going to be, you know, an upward drift in this, I think it's fair to say. What will also happen is there'll be standardization. And I think there is a view, I don't know if it's the case, that schools have got many different definitions of individual roles. What constitutes a business manager in one role might not be what constitutes a business manager in another role, or a site manager, or those sorts of things. So the positives of this is it brings consistency, it brings a structure, it avoids equal pay claims, which, as you know, councils have struggled with in recent years, but there is a piece of work to be done. A specific meeting is going to be set up in January with HR that will kick this off. But like I say, from a schools forum perspective, I just wanted you to make you aware, particularly the maintained schools, because we need to be aware that there will be a budget implication for this. The implementation of this, I think, would be from September. So we need to be aware of that in the budgeting process, and that will be built in as we move forward. So it's only an information item. Like I said, I'm not an expert and can't answer a huge number of questions on it, but I thought it was worth flagging up at this meeting to be aware that it's quite a big exercise that's coming, and will need to be completed over the next number of months. And that's all to say, Chair.
Yeah, that's thank you. I'll open this up to questions. I would just say though that having approved the increase in the de-delegated trade union rates, they're going to have to earn their money now, because this will be a big piece of work, and having your union representatives acting alongside their members, our staff, will probably take at least a little bit of the pain away. But I've implemented these reviews and will be doing so again soon, and they do hoover up a lot of time and energy. And I know that for the heads who'll be having to coordinate this, trying to keep schools on track and trying to keep pupil progress on track and dealing with these kind of issues will be quite a demand on time during 2024. Marie.
Thank you, Joe. Just very quickly, are there any timescales on that so we can plan it into workflows?
Excuse me. As I said, I think the aim is to implement in September, but I think HR would have to advise on what the timescales are for returns and those sort of things, and they will do in the specific meeting that we're coming up very shortly. So I guess the answer to your question is sorry, I don't know any more details than that.
And since HR services are now outsourced, that's going to be very complicated, isn't it? Because we've all got our own providers.
Yes, but as I remind HR very often, Maintain Schools continue to be employees of the council, and we have to put resource into that as well. So there should be and will be support from our HR services to support you in managing our employees. That does not mean there might not be some call on HR, as Paul said. But again, I'm by no means an expert on this. I've done some of the work for my teams, as you can imagine. But all I can say is further details will follow. But we wanted to give Forum the heads up about it because there will be budget implications.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Marie. Rob?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I remember, although I'm not involved with directly leading Maintain Schools now, I was back in 2010, 2011 when the Job Families Review happened some considerable time ago. And I do remember getting letters at that point where we had to ring fence parts of our reserves just in case there was any legal implications with changes that were being brought. Which was a bit frustrating at the time, but we were told we had to do it as part of this kind of Job Families Review where you were aligning people's job roles and scales. Do you foresee at this early stage, might be too early, but do you foresee that that's going to happen again?
I don't know is the honest answer. It does sound like a sensible approach, and I can see why that would be suggested. But it's very difficult for me to see what the impact of this is going to be because I just don't know what the workforce looks like and how material that is within the individual schools' budgets. And so, like I said, I think early on in the process, that sort of thing will have to be the question that we consider from a finance perspective when we understand how broad the impact of this is going to be. So for some schools, it might be very small. There might be very few local government pay scale staff. For other schools, there might be far more, depending on the structure that they put in place and those sorts of things. But it's a really good question, Rob, and I think it's something we should consider going forward.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. Is there any other questions or comments for Neil on this? No. Okay. That's it. I think that's us done. Unless there's any other business. Has anyone got any other business? No? Okay. Well, thank you very much. And well, thank you to all members. It's been quite an intensive meeting. There's been quite a lot to go through. I really appreciate your attendance and appreciate the time and the effort that you've put in to join the meeting, to read the papers, and to ask the questions that we've gone through. I'm going to close the meeting, but would just like to wish everyone a happy break when it comes. So thank you very much indeed, everyone.